what I need to do for tonight, which will make sense as we go on into the session now, I've actually got to find someone that I believe, and I don't know, this person can take this as a compliment or an insult now. I need to find someone who I believe is possibly close to, if not equal to, as crazy, mad, and disturbed and off a balanced point of being human as I can find to pray for us, because that will just make it even more special. So I've nominated someone who might not be surprised I'm not going to nominate them. So Nande, congratulations. I consider you to be possibly as crazy as I am. So if you can open in prayer for us. And I think what you should do, Nande, you should probably pray for these poor souls that are about to experience how crazy you and I are. So spare them a thought.
I think the most unsurprising thing right now is how unfazed and unshocked my family is sitting here. They don't seem shocked at all that you said this. Why is they no?
That means they know
So
you.
I don't. Yeah. So okay, not a problem. I don't mind. Father God, we just pray that you have mercy on everyone that you're about to hear this message. We just pray that we may be receptive and everyone can see a touch of crazy and a touch of difficulty and hardship that not only all these characters that Darren is going to be telling us about, but we may see some hope in the difficulties and struggles and mental strain we all suffer in a level. So we just pray that your spirit may inspire us and shake things up and always make us open to your truth. And as always, as he always does, let the spirit continue to glorify Jesus and all he has done. Ask this in his mighty name. Amen.
I mean, okay, so this is going to be a bit of a different session. I mean, if you got questions or whatever, you can probably pop them in as I talk, but it's probably going to be a little bit more lecture style than normal. I won't have as many questions to ask, actually, to be quite honest, but that doesn't mean you can't interact as well. Please feel free to jump in when you want to, I guess, or again at the end. So yeah, let's see. We do have a time limit because I think the power is going off here at 10, which means the internet will cut. So I'm going to try and fit in with that. But as far, if we don't get to the end, that's also fine. As far as we get is as far as we get. We'll get somewhere useful even in the midst of that. But please don't feel like you can't interject or ask questions or make statements in the midst of what goes on. So let's get started with this one. We're just like you, personality types in the Bible. This isn't just going to be about that. I'm going to spread the net a bit further, and hopefully, as well, in the process of this, you will look to find yourself as well. I think that's part of the hope of this. As I said, it's going to be a different kind of a session, but I'm hoping still informative and useful to everyone. Um, that it will still have value, and you know encourage, I guess, and start a conversation that you can have in your own spaces. And obviously, if you share this video with people, and obviously those who are going to watch the recording of this, that they can also start conversations and get other people around to watch it. So um yeah, Nanda, I see my sister's coming into the waiting room. If you can, because I can't get out of this now, what I want to get out of it now, if you can just try and
Yeah,
get.
she should be in now.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at. And we're going to start here with a disclaimer first. Let me just get this going. There we go. So the disclaimer, number one, let me say this. I'm not a registered psychologist. I'm not a registered therapist. I'm not a registered psychiatrist. Okay, so I don't claim any of that. And quite honestly, I'm not in the least bit interested in being any one of those professions either, being one of those professionals either. I'm not going to take away anything from people who do that. I respect everybody's craft, what they do, their expertise, what they go into. Um, I'm saying this as a disclaimer because honestly, and this is one of the times where I get to just be as autistic as I am. So if you'll give me space to be that, I am sick to death of people that go around saying, "Oh, you can't say these things because you're not this and you're not that." You've probably heard this done. Maybe you're even one of those people. So I beg you from the bottom of my twisted, strange heart and brain, please think before you say that, before you think that, especially tonight. Or, I mean, look, you can actually say it, I guess, in a way, but just hear out what I'm going to say here. Because I'm going to say stuff that's going to trigger that traditional, but somewhat, I think, uninformed opinion. Oh, you can't say that because you're not these things that are on the screen right now. Um, you know, it's got to be careful. I've got friends who are psychologists and are in these spaces, and I do respect what everyone does, and everyone should respect everyone else in different ways. But it doesn't always mean we have to always agree on everything either. We'll try and explain as we go through this a little bit of a better understanding of what all these different neurological sciences and the practitioners of these sciences, what they all are. So, not being all of those, I am one of these though. I am a professional teacher. Now, Nande, if your parents are on, I don't know who else. I don't think there's anyone else that's on right now that is also professional teachers. But Nande, you can just tell me if your parents start smiling with what I'm about to say or nod their head. I'll take that as confirmation. Otherwise, maybe I've totally missed what a teacher is. But let me tell you from my professional opinion as a teacher, I have been and had to do multiple times, just even as a regular teacher, not even going into the position I actually hold in the school I'm in, which I'm not going to try and go into too much depth with, although I will tell you some stories of what I've dealt with in my teaching career and in my professional capacity. I've done the work of a psychologist, I've done the work of a therapist. Maybe not so much the psychiatrist, because obviously, technically, at a school, you're not allowed to administer drugs of any kind. That even tends to go down to even things as simple as discipline and all of that tends to be frowned upon to give that. But quite honestly, as a teacher, if you've been in the class for more than 10 minutes, you have been exposed to things far beyond any one of these professionals in their private capacity would ever have to deal with. And are your parents reacting in any way, or if they've got anything to say in agreement or disagreement to that? Because I just want to check if I am a normal teacher or if I've totally missed the boat in what I've done.
Yes, definitely, we agree with you, Aaron.
Thank you. So there you're getting another witness to tell you. Teachers, you know what? In a perfect world, teachers walk into a class and all we do is open a textbook and teach and then mark exams. In reality, it's never ever been that simple. I've dealt with all kinds of things, like I say, that would go far beyond the scope and boundaries of the professionals I've listed above. Now, unfortunately, because of social perceptions in modern society, teachers are considered less professional than these listed above here. Now, I don't go around advocating to try and make teachers be seen in the same light as all these other people as well. It's not important enough to me. I don't care really if people think as a teacher I'm able to deal with psychological issues or not. While they're contemplating whether or not I can do it, I'm busy doing it. So, I mean, Nande, you can look without giving stories away, Nande, what would your personal opinion be, having spent time with me in just about every facet of what I've done at a school? What would your summarized personal opinion be?
Honestly, not just spending time with you, but even hearing the stories my parents have been growing up. Besides what you say, like actually writing a prescription of, like saying you can take this drug or what, you're a psychologist, you're a parent, you do everything. I've seen you do almost. I was shocked when I did it at hand how much I thought I just was going to learn how to properly explain content material to kids, but that was like 20% of what I was doing, if not less, and probably like 5% of what you had to do. It's literally putting down fire upon fire and managing the mentality and personality of what 30 kids for 40 minutes, and oh gosh, it was a lot.
There we go. So there's another, and the reason why I'm putting this disclaimer on, because like what I'm about to go into is going to undoubtedly delve into into psychology, into what therapists deal with, even to what psychiatrists deal with in terms of diagnosing mental illnesses effectively. I'm going to talk about that stuff. So I'm putting the disclaimer here so that you don't switch off because you don't see doctor in front of my name, which I also advise to people not to get too excited about. You can get a doctorate in planting tomatoes. Not again taking away from people who get doctorates, but don't assume getting a doctorate means you've reached Solomon's level of wisdom, because that's also not true. Again, I respect everyone who puts that much attention into their professions.
I just like
Dismiss,
to,
I'm just dismissing the general misconception about how we elevate certain characters way above other characters. Kathy, did I hear you?
yes, you did. I was just going to say, I used to be a teacher, and
Ah,
it's incredible that one student would not respond in any way. I'd speak to her directly and show her things and say, shall we do this? And she wouldn't respond. And it taught me a lot, actually. I had to find ways of
right. So there
interacting.
you go. So Kathy, clearly not everyone is the same, and you obviously realize through that experience that whether you like it or not, diagnosed or undiagnosed, when you've got a class in front of you, you are dealing with who knows what spectrum of mental illnesses, of broken homes. There's no end. The possibilities are literally endless, good and bad. And that's why
Yes,
personally I feel teaching should be as equally difficult a profession to get into as is being a medical doctor that will cut people open one day, to be quite honest.
yes.
In
I was not very good at being a class teacher. I used to do more one-on-one. I failed
Sure.
at class teaching. And to answer the other part, in career, you're very highly elevated as a teacher. That's probably the highest that you position that you could have
You know what, Kathy?
in career.
And I'm not saying this because it's biased, but technically it should be. But it's actually in general society, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not.
That's true.
For the
Yeah.
parents in the moment who are dealing with problem children, to them, yes, they see it, but more generally not, which is again why I say, I mean, if, look, Kathy, if I was a registered psychologist, therapist, or psychiatrist right now, I wouldn't need a disclaimer, would I? You see my point? I wouldn't feel the need to put a disclaimer on before I start talking, because everyone will just be, oh, is it Dr. Yonka? Wow, well, get the notebooks out. Let's start writing down what he says. Um, so this is just like a bit of precursor to make sure everybody, or at least as many people as possible, still keep their ears open when they go on to hear me say things that, well, probably is in the realm of these other professions I'm mentioning here. And then I'm going to put another one that I think is even equal to and a little bit higher in some ways. And I need to justify this one. I am not a self proclaimed apostle or self proclaimed anything. I will justify my statement in terms of saying anointed. Anyone can be a spiritual leader. Sangoma is a spiritual leader. Not that many people should take that too seriously. But why do I get to say anointed? Very simply, um, the only way we can really be sure someone's anointed to do the work they're doing is if other people confirm that and see that over a period of time, and they get multiple commendations to say, I see that in you. So people with credibility across the spectrum, across the board, see that. And not, well, obviously with people who are on the group right now, I think if I had to ask for confirmation, there'd be people who would say, Kathy, I know you're one of them. Um, but
Yes,
I could
definitely.
line up other people too. So I'm not claiming myself to be this. I'm taking a title that other people have given me. So I think I am allowed to use it. I don't think I'm God. I don't think I'm Jesus. I don't think I'm better than anyone else. I do think that I am an anointed spiritual leader because people have told me that what they've learned from me is blessed, and they've been drawn closer to God through talking with me and me serving them. So I do believe it's service. I don't believe I'm above anyone else. So I just need, that's another part of the disclaimer actually, before it sounds like I'm blowing my own horn. I'm really not doing that in that way. We do have to have spiritual leaders who are anointed. That is declared as a thing we should expect. And I am operating under the belief from other people's confirmations that that is that. And that should on its own give me credibility to speak on what I'm going to speak. But yes, I'm just going to give you overviews of my experience, things that I've dealt with, things that I've counseled with, things that I've been directly involved in. I'm not going to try and go into deep um, description of this. You can think for yourself what some of this is. You can ask me if you want more clarity, but I'm not going to go and give hours of information on this. So that's what I'm saying. So, number one, gender confusion. I've dealt with multiple people who are either still in the closet as to being gay, wrestling with it, knowing it's wrong, not knowing what to do with it, how to it across a broad range. I've dealt with that from really heartbreaking stories to, shocking and disappointing end results in these stories. I've dealt with issues of rape before in ministry, molestation, incest, demonic possession, emotional abuse, physical abuse, affairs, obviously leading to divorce often, death, just general death, people struggling with losing loved ones and making sense of why they've lost them, done funerals, I've done weddings, depression, dealing with people. That's the one I deal with most often, in fact. Suicide, dealt with that already too. And I mean, this again, let me tell you something that, and yes, probably one of the reasons that I ended up not choosing the professions that I mentioned previously, because I was on the path to some of those, was definitely looking into it. And I thank God I didn't. And here's why. In those fields, you are bound by a code of ethics and of practice, just like doctors are, all of that. So there's very strict parameters of what you can and can't do. And just by definition of those, which are 99.9% secular offices, secular spaces where you don't easily, unless you're going to go into a spiritual ministry that's going to give you more freedoms, you would not be able to comfortably, openly deal with most of these topics. So for me, being outside of the, how would I say, board controlled professions that deal with human issues, if I can use that, neurological and emotional and all of that, psychological issues. Because I operate outside of those, and because, at least in South Africa and most of the world, actually, there's not, probably negatively, this is probably a negative, there's not proper regulation of pastors and spiritual leaders doing these things. People that are outside of that registered counseling space that I've mentioned before have way more freedom. And I don't doubt that that's probably a bad and dangerous thing and a serious lack in countries where this is, but literally, because that's the case, I get to, with absolute freedom, deal with all of these things. So this is in ministry. This isn't even talking about school, which again, as I said, I might show you some of the examples of that. But now, ignoring even ignoring that, consider the following. Quick question. What does it look like is going on in this picture?
Suggested heart attack.
Right. Now, Kathy, are you a medical doctor?
No,
So how did you think to say that he's having a heart attack? You're right, but that's is that incredible that you knew that, or is it
no,
even
it's the graphics.
right? Okay. So you understand where the heart is in the human body, obviously. You understand that when someone has a heart attack, obviously they tend to clutch their chest. You'd probably understand that a heart attack victim can buckle over and complain about breathing. In fact, Kathy, would you agree with me even that 9 times out of 10, the heart attack victim knows they're having a heart attack because they
That's
often,
my understanding, yes.
yeah, they often say it. They know it. Now, are they all medical doctors?
No.
No. But here's the great thing about being alive for more than 5 minutes. You start learning things and you start seeing patterns and you start becoming aware of things that, yes, professionals will tend to deal with more expertly, but it's not that we can't all see what's going on around us. And this is part of the reason why I say that statement of, it's annoying and tiring when people say, oh, you can't say that, you're not a doctor, you're not this. There is a very broad space where we can interpret quite accurately what's going on around us. Now, Kathy, is being able to see that someone's having a heart attack equal to giving them perfect treatment for that heart attack?
No.
No, it's definitely not. Those are worlds apart. So if Kathy and I had to find any of you having a heart attack, we could probably comfortably help you determine that it's probably a heart attack. But please don't ask us to do open heart surgery and save your life, because we'd probably kill you. So there is a difference. And I just put this question on to make the obvious daft reality of those people who do that thing, like, oh, you can't say that, you're not a therapist. It's so uninformed, because the question here is, did he bump his toe? Well, obviously not. When someone's clutching their chest, you don't offer them a tissue to wipe their nose. You can see what's going on around you, and I think we just need to give space to be logical in that way. So with that said, please stand by as pseudo Dr. Yonker takes you down a little bit of a interesting and probably somewhat disturbing view into the neurological sciences that mixes with the supernatural and philosophical realities of being human. And we're going to
Can I
start in,
interrupt?
yes, please do.
Sorry, it's just Diane wants to has been kicked off and wants to come back on.
Oh, Nanda, can you check that out? Is she in the waiting room?
No, I don't see anyone. I'll check it out. So
I think she wants the link, direct link to um, Zoom.
Okay, just tell her to check on the group, because that's the only way we can do it right now for her. Because if she was trying to get back in, it would probably put a flash on my screen too. I'm not seeing it. I'm gonna give it a minute. Nanda, you gonna check that out? Gary, can you try and contact Diane just quickly too?
yeah,
Uh,
no, I'm looking for it.
I'm gonna be in a second. Let me just get something. Any luck there yet?
No, nothing yet. No one's coming on yet.
Okay, Gary or Dad, I'm gonna carry on. If you guys can maybe message her, because I don't have the phone by me, so I wouldn't be able to do it in any case, even if she is trying to message me. We'll carry on, and hopefully she can get on again somehow. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, and this one's going to be equally shocking, probably. Um, we are all mentally ill. Any thoughts on that before I go on? Because I mean, you can't put a slide like that on and not give people a chance to lose their breath or something. There we go, Nanda. She's trying to get back in. Any thoughts? You agree? You've never thought about
My
this?
mother's a bit. She's a bit far away, but she was saying that she totally agrees. We just differ in how it comes out or how it looks. That's what she wanted to say. We differ
Yeah.
what
I,
in degrees.
I don't think I agree.
Okay.
That probably proves it, actually.
I guess, Kathy, the question is, what does it mean to be mentally ill? And that's probably where subjectivity comes in.
Yes.
I believe we are all mentally ill because we are born into a broken world. Um, We are incapable of being rational 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Um, we are prone to be guided by emotions. Our very subjective worldviews color our world completely. Um,
Yes, and environment and upbringing and all those things affect us.
right. I mean, Kathy, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't go 5 or 6 people, or maybe let's be generous for you, 10 people down your contact list on your phone. And if I asked them, has Kathy ever exhibited actions or said things that you would maybe think she needs to go and see a doctor, that she's been in the sun too long? And I'm saying this because this would be true of anyone. I think one of
Yeah,
those people would say, yeah, now that you mention it, and
just ask your mum.
yeah, there we
She'd be the
go. We probably could. So the point is, and I know that mentally ill, like, no, how would, like, don't say that. It's true. And you got to know the person saying this wears his illness like a badge, and with level of, I don't want to say pride, but a level of honesty and willingness not to con himself, let's say that, which is going to become clearer as I move on. So that comment will make more sense. Any other thoughts? And disagreeing is also fine. You are allowed to. Who's brave enough to own that statement with me?
well, I could say it like of me and you, but I couldn't say that about everybody because, well, to quote you, I'm not qualified to make that opinion.
Darren, I've always said, who and what is normal?
There we go. That's another wonderful way of saying it. And you know what, Diane? Normal, guess what word immediately has to be pulled into the equation when you say normal? A worldview.
Is that it?
I can take you to tribes in the world right now who literally, for lack of a better term, think it's perfectly normal to circumcise virgin girls. Are
True.
they
Yeah.
are they mentally stable?
It can't be. They can't be.
There's countries in the world where you can become a wife by 9 or 10 years old. Does that sound mentally stable? I live in a world where people hold up their phones and pucker their lips like they are trying out to be a fish in a fish tank. Does that sound normal? I watched someone do it in front of a very crappy old looking car at the beachfront the other day, and you would have sworn that the world's press was there waiting for that photo as they stood there without their bra on but a terribly stretched shirt over it. And let me tell you, that woman was sure that she was the event of the century. Like, I almost got out of my car and went up to her and said, are you mentally ill? But I would have been answering my own question. So is that normal? I live in a place, and you know this, you guys would call it boy races in New Zealand, that they have their cars' bodies so low, their suspension is set so low that they've almost got to stop by a normal bump that a normal car can ride over perfectly fine. They've almost got to turn sideways and take about 5 hours to get over the bump. That's how cool they are.
Can I say that I agree with your statement altogether, but I would go even further and say that some people, I'm not going to generalize, there's some that, well, but I think we all are mentally ill. Some
Yeah.
can just disguise it and hide, mask it.
Oh, there we go. That's the thing. The thing
And the
is
thing
this,
about
Gary. You know
the
what
thing
else
about
you've got to say?
sorry, not that
Sorry.
I'm sorry, not that I'm a professional by any sense at all, but the problem is that psychologists and psychiatrists, and they've got a it's subjective to the person. So you could be fitting a mold based on what they see on the day. There is no such thing as normal.
Sure,
Right.
Darren.
And they'll agree with, you could have a string of things that have made you who you are, but each one of them there's an excuse for in a psychologist's perspective
Yeah,
or a reason behind. So it's subjective, doesn't necessarily mean. So there is so the
right.
apple. So which came first? You know, the chicken or the egg?
Kerry, here's another question that you can answer, because I respect that you're saying you're not a professional, and I'm saying you don't even need to say that. You are degrading your own intelligence, and having spoken enough to you, you are intelligent. So I'm giving you an upgrade here. You don't need to say you're not professional. You're a mother. You're a wife to my brother. I've watched you be a mother. I've watched you be a wife, and I'm giving you the promotion. You are a professional human being. So
One.
take the upgrade here. Let me say this.
No.
You know that every one of those people in those practitioner spaces, and again, I respect their spaces, but their spaces aren't more important than anyone else's. They are guided by principles that they have to stick to. So, like you're saying, whatever they want to think, if they take their practice seriously, their own thinking gets molded into the thinking of their science. And I can tell you, someone who follows psychological journals um, around the world, can I tell you what is the only constant in psychology and other sciences, predictably? It's change. So
Yeah.
they don't have it all together. And God bless them for what they're doing. Good work gets done there. But in any sphere, in any field of work, sometimes people get second opinions, either because they need to get a second opinion and it was the right thing to do, or that second opinion confirms what the first opinion was. But it's because
And
we
the
are
problem
all
is as
just
well,
human
Darren,
beings
is that
too.
the problem is that the ballpark and the um, gets shifted with every new postmodern idea.
There
So
we
with
go.
every year, there's a new idea of what's normal, and last year's normal is no longer normal. So
Exactly.
it's almost like we're sort of keeping up with the world,
But that's it. And
which is
that's why I say we've got to be careful what we give too much, weight to. And again, I'm not saying that, I work with psychologists and therapists at school in what I do. So please don't think that I'm degrading that. I refer a lot of work to them that I'm not willing to touch, if that makes sense, where I'm not willing to officially diagnose. I do respect those boundaries still. So I'm not suggesting that I'm undermining all of that. But I'm saying I think we can give ourselves a bit more credit as human beings who have been around. We are professional human beings too. So we get to have an opinion too, is what I'm saying, I suppose. But you're absolutely right, because what does tend to happen is there is subjectivity and things change. The pop culture defines way too much. So on the screen now, you're seeing a whole lot of concepts and things that relate. And I want to say this, we need to communicate with each other, right? So when we communicate, we create language. And in language, we create subsets of concepts that helps box things in so that we can speak more fluently and we can keep things going. So we often give names and borders to, and it's fine. We have to. We put it in these boxes that these, lingo, as they say. Every kind of profession, every kind of speciality in anything has lingo, and that's fine. It works, and we need to use it. So we can't necessarily always say what's right or wrong. We just have these different spaces where this happens. So I have to, if I'm going to do something like this and tell you about people and mental illnesses and get us to discuss that, and you're going to find yourself in all of this, then I have to lead the way by being the guinea pig myself, right? So I'm going to do that for you. And either you're going to see things, and me doing this is going to make you feel more comfortable to evaluate yourself or even speak, or it's at least going to show you that Flippy does put his money where his mouth is in terms of being equally hardened or open and critical of himself as he is of everyone else. So whichever one works for you, this is it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into who I am and what I am. Now, this won't be equally news to everyone. Some of you might never want to hear me talk again after this. Hopefully not, but you might be uncomfortable with how much you're going to find out about who I am. I'm using myself because I'm a perfect candidate on a night like this. So What I'm showing you now is this quotes from Existential Depression in Gifted Children by James Webb. It comes from the Unbounded Spirit website, which is a space where issues of mental illness gets dealt with. This article is a go-to for me very often. I go to it because it gives me peace, and it gives me peace because it so perfectly describes me, and I'll explain what this means as we go on. And since my sister, my father, and my brother, and I think my mother's probably listening in too, I don't know if mom is, but anyway, there's 4 people that can confirm or deny what I'm going to say to you now. So I'm not able to lie to you unless I've convinced all of them to lie with me about what I'm going to say now. So here's one of the comments, and I actually would like my family to confirm or deny this if they can. I don't mind if we do that. It doesn't have to take that long because it can just be a yay or a no. It has been my experience, this is from the article, that gifted and talented persons are more likely to experience a type of depression referred to as existential depression. Okay, so that's the first comment. I, I think on the group, I did mention this, but I'll quickly mention it briefly, that I unquestionably have existential depression. Um, and my first memory of it is a picture perfect example of how this works. It was around 5 years old. Dad, Gary, Diane, can any of you remember the vintage car duvets that we had? Gary, especially you. Do you remember it?
Yes, yes, vividly, very
Yeah.
clearly.
So with my story of realizing that I had to die, I remember mom was on the phone with Auntie Esther even. I don't know if mom would probably not remember that because it was not an event that I spoke to her about, which in itself is an answer, a thing of its own. And I remember running to the room after seeing a little clip of World War II and people getting killed. And at 5 years old, coming to the mind numbing, gut wrenching conclusion that one day I would have to die. Now, does thoughts of death sound like something an average 5-year-old is dealing with or should be dealing with? It's really not, because it's not a normal thing to do. And yet, I remember that experience vividly. It wasn't even the only one of that kind. It's just the one I use because it's one of the earliest memories that I have of that kind of thing. Another quote here: why should such existential concerns occur disproportionately among gifted persons? In other words, what this article is saying is that gifted children tend to be disproportionately in the, if you took a whole sample of normal of society across the board, it is a runaway margin. Gifted children or people tend to be more prone towards existential depression. Okay, so let's quickly clear the air with something. Am I suggesting that I am gifted? Yes. Now, to break out of your worldview, and our startled you might be that someone like me can say that about myself. Let me clear the air for you. Does it mean I think I'm smarter than most people around me? Without question. Come spend a day with me and I'll prove it to you as well so that you'll know it yourself too. Does it mean that I think I'm better than everyone else? No, it doesn't mean that. Not at all. If you have that experience with me, it's because your insecurity is over your lack of confidence in yourself, or maybe your low intelligence. Could be either one of those two that causes that for you. But I don't believe I'm better than anyone else. And you can be around me long enough to find that out too. So partially it is because a substantial thought and reflection must occur to even consider such notions. So in other words, in order to suffer from existential depression, you've got to have an abnormal processing of thought and reflection that's almost crippling, if that makes sense, right? So you're going to be thinking about things to such a high degree and so often that it actually causes a breakdown in you. Now, again, we all know that doesn't happen to everybody. 99% of people in the world aren't doing that. Most people are not doing that it hits them, and least of all as a child. Um, yeah, to such notions rather than simply focusing on superficial day-to-day aspects of life. Let me tell you one of the other elements that comes common with gifted children, depression as well, that happens within this, and in autism too, is that you start feeling like an alien. And I'm going to tell you a story about how that worked for me too. You feel abnormal when you watch other people focusing on things that you can't believe they're giving their time to. That has been the story of my life, honestly. Obviously, it's a worldview issue. assuming that I was right wasn't always the case, of course, in that sense. Because as Diane asked the question, what is normal? I will take this time to say that me being that person doing that thing is less normal than people not doing it. Does that make sense? Anyone can confirm. Does it make sense if I say that? That in that context of that story that I'm explaining, being debilitated to the point where your whole life is crippled because you're thinking about the meaning of life, which often is something that appears in depression, don't get me wrong too. But existential depression is also, it can look like regular depression, but it's also not actually regular. It's a way bigger deal. Um, and people suffering from that, especially from childhood, as I did, definitely without question, that's not normal. There you can get a base of normal, and that's not normal. So I unquestionably can positively tell you that I was definitely, and still am not. I wouldn't fit normal by anyone's standards, I don't think, really. Next quote. Sorry, I actually asked that question. Does it make sense if I'm saying that? I don't want to be confusing and not getting.
Yes, it does make sense. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So here's the next quote.
And your mum has always said you were different when you were young to
Right.
what we consider normal.
There we go. Perfect. You're right. I know my mother does. That's perfect. So there's further confirmation. Kathy can speak. She's a close friend of my mother's. I don't know, Dad. You can tell me if Mom's there too, because she could be confirming things as well. But Kathy, thank you. You're spot on. It is true. I often tell people that I owe my mother a lot of flowers for my childhood. It's there's I don't
She
know.
prefers pot plants.
Eh?
Pot. She prefers pot plants.
Okay, I'll have to get to work on that. I'll have to buy a nursery or something. Okay, because gifted children are able to consider watch this. This is an important one. Because gifted children are able to consider the possibilities of how things might be, they tend to be idealists. However, they are simultaneously able to see that the world is falling short of how it might be. Because because they are intense, gifted children feel keenly the disappointment and frustration which occurs when ideals are not reached. Okay, so what that means is gifted people in general, not even just kids, see what things should be. They are often filled with hopefulness, and then reality comes crashing down, which just pushes the depression even deeper. Now, there's a bit of subjectivity, or a lot of subjectivity in that actually, because what tends to happen is you figure everyone should be getting this. Uh, Dad, I don't know. Gary or Diane, I don't know, because I don't know if Mom's listening in on this now or not. Can any of you remember the one word that Mom always used to hate me using because she said it rubs people up the wrong way? I will laugh if someone can actually remember that word because I'll never forget it.
Give us a hint.
It's one word that I used to use a lot, and it used to drive Mom mad because she's trying to protect me. I know now, not that I knew it in the moment. It's a word I'd always use. And when I would
I know.
talk, and then Mom would say, you can't do that because you make yourself sound like you're better than everybody else. And it's condescending to people, which obviously was made worse because when Mom was saying this to me, I was very young. And I would use it even talking to adults.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know that you would. I don't even know if Mom would have remembered, although she might because I used it so often. It was really a thing that she tried to get out of me, which I think she eventually did, but I do occasionally still use it now. Gary, you don't know. Dad, you don't know.
No, I can't really recall that.
Well, you guys can check in with Mom on this one. The word was obviously. Whenever I would talk and say things, even in the house or to other people, I would say, well, obviously you know this, obviously that. And out of context and being misinterpreted, it does and can sound condescending to the people that it gets used towards. But let me explain from my point of view, which is what this is suggesting, why I used the word obviously. It actually coming from me was a sense of this which is suggesting, well, everyone must know that this is how how it works. Now that can sound, it sounds subjective, and I guess it can be subjective, but when I used to use it, really what I'm saying is I'm kind of like saying, I don't want to insult you by assuming you don't already know this about this thing, if that makes sense to everyone. So that's the way I was using it, but clearly I was not communicating that very well, and I was causing offense in doing that. My point is, this is that context. It's that idealism of like, but everyone must at least know that. And the truth of the matter, what I started learning in life, no, everyone doesn't automatically know that. And I'm going to give you an example, and Nande can bear me out probably more than anyone else because he sees it so often because he spends enough time around me. I often get people who say to me, wow, how did you do this? Or what? That's so amazing. How did you get that right? How long did it take you to do this or to finish that? And Nanda can probably tell you my face looks a bit confused when people say that. Nanda, have you ever seen me? Nanda, I've done it to you, actually. Have you seen that?
You've done it multiple times.
Right. And I want to explain what that look is. It's a look of almost like, why are you so impressed that I did that thing? Because that's easy to do. Okay. And that again shows a big disconnect between me and maybe the audience I'm talking to. And that is subjective again from my point and subjective from theirs, because if they can't do it and I can, it's probably more impressive to them than it is to me. But that's generally a case with anyone who knows what they're doing in a field, I think, that they're not as impressed with what they can do as other people might be who themselves can't do it, if that makes sense. And that makes life quite colorful, I'll tell you that much. Moving on. Similarly, these youngsters quickly spot the inconsistencies, arbitrariness, and absurdities in society and in the behaviors of those around them. If there's one thing that always killed me is when people won't say what's really going on. And that's gotten me into trouble as a child and even into adulthood, has lost me a lot of favor with people because I cannot handle people not just saying what's going on. I've I probably disturb a lot of social spaces and people's safety in those social spaces when I just call it out because I can't do otherwise. I don't have, my brain won't let me dance around an issue. Okay, so, and that leads to the second point. Why do people engage in hypocritical behaviors in which they say one thing, then do another? Why do people say things they really don't mean at all? That sums up my existence. And I think my mother would probably confirm that for you as well in terms of that. Next one, when gifted children try to share these concerns with others, they're usually met with reactions ranging from puzzlement to hostility. I've lived that. They discover that others, particularly of their age, clearly do not share these concerns, but instead are focused on more concrete issues and on fitting in with others' expectations. I never bothered with that. Often by even first grade, these youngsters, particularly the more highly gifted ones, feel isolated from their peers and perhaps from their families as they find that others are not prepared to discuss such weighty concerns. To explain to you how you feel isolated and different, Gary, Diane, Dad, and again, if my mother's listening, I might have told you guys this before. For most of my childhood, 10 up to 10, 11 years old, I used to imagine I was adopted. Really, I was convinced I must have been adopted because I didn't feel like I was part of the family. I felt that different, that strange. Watching all of you think and how you did things, I just didn't seem like I'm part of that group. So that again confirms this. This is exactly, that's my experience of it. I remember those thoughts. I remember, I wonder who my parents really were because this can't be it. These people are different to me. I always used to wonder at what age would I be told by my parents that I'm actually adopted. I kid you not. That's literally the story with that. Okay, when the intensity is combined with multi-potentiality, these youngsters become particularly frustrated with the existential limitations of space and time. There simply aren't enough hours in the day to develop all their talents that many of these children have. Can you guys remember as a child, when I was a child, because I remember you all laughing at me, you'd often ask me, what am I going to be today? Can any of you remember that? And don't worry, I'm not angry if you do remember it, because I remember it vividly.
Yes.
And Diane, if you remember, you guys even laughed about it.
Yeah.
Not to be nasty. I think it must have been comical having a child around you that what to you might have looked like he thinks he's God because he thinks he can do anything. So I get the laughter, but if you can remember what my face used to look like in those times, I was looking back at you guys and wondering, are you crazy? If I tell you I can do something, I can do it. So there's the flip side of that and the struggle of that. I don't know if mom remembers this too. My mother had a friend who was a brilliant pianist, and I went for piano lessons. Well, let's say I went for about 2 or 3 piano lessons, in fact. And I'm going to tell you literally what happened. If you want to confirm the story, if she's still alive, if she hasn't lost her mind and she can still remember it, I imagine she would. My piano teacher's name was Wendy Dubell. And I remember by the second or third time I went to her, we sat down at the piano and I said, I want to show you something. I started playing something that I just figured out. I can't remember. I just started playing it. She looked at me, and that was our last lesson together. Because here's her words, and I'll never forget her words because it didn't make sense at the time. It makes more sense now. She said to me, I'm not going to teach you piano because what you have just done, I kid you not, I'm not lying to you. You can go and find Wendy, and at best, she'll have to say she doesn't remember it because I can hear her saying it. She said these were her words to me, which didn't make sense at the time. Her words to me was, what you've just done is not supposed to be music in terms of music theory on piano is not possible, or you're not supposed to do it, or it doesn't work. It was something like that. The gist of what she was saying, if I teach you music theory the normal way, I'll kill whatever this is that you are doing. And what you can do shouldn't be killed. Diane, do you, Gary, either one of you remember that when I went for piano lessons? Can you guys remember that? I'm just trying to confirm this because I know it must sound like I'm freaking think I'm something else, but I'm really not making this stuff up.
Yes, I think we went together to Wendy for piano lessons.
Can you remember the story? Because I remember it vividly. I remember I was sitting. Can you remember Wendy's house? It was there on Cape Road in that flatlets across the old, what petrol station was it there? Shell, I think it was, next to the basketball courts. I'll never forget it. I was sitting on the left side of the piano. She was sitting on the right of the chair. And I, at the start of the lesson, told her, I want to show you something. And she said, no, I don't think you should carry on. I've got to imagine she might have told mom that, but I don't know. But I just know that happened. I can tell other stories like that, but I think that does the trick to explain this concept that things can get done, and it is a frustrating thing because you want to do this and then you want to do that and you want to do this, but you can't get to all of it because there just isn't enough time, and that in itself becomes a frustration. I've lived that story too. Not followed through on a lot of things that I could do and wanted to do, and it becomes a negative, of course, too. My point is that I'm explaining that this is a real thing. This article is trustworthy, and this article brings me a lot of peace. When I get seriously disconnected from the world around me, I literally come back and read this article just to find ground zero again. Um, there's no ultimate right choice. Even choosing a vocation can be difficult if one is trying to make a career decision. I'm going to use another example, and I promise you I'm not paying Nanda. You can get his bank statements and see that I'm not. Nanda, I'm going to use one more example because I think it will help. Tell everyone the story of what you experienced when you came to Cape Town with me or Joburg with me and Quentin, knowing who Quentin is, and then what you yourself said to me. I didn't say to you what you said to me about what surprised you about what I could do with Quentin. Do you remember that you said to me?
What you could do with Quentin?
Yeah, in terms of
Oh,
the film stuff.
okay, yeah. Now it's clicking. Basically, Quentin being a professional filmmaker and actor, you he was I was being lost. You each could communicate, give improvements, edit, deal with the equipment, high tech equipment, and all of the post production stuff on equal footing. Like he wasn't talking to he didn't need to explain what he wants to do to you. Neither did you guys, which he had to me. Um, I was actually quite shocked because you never really go into depth, even with me, about that stuff. But the same thing happened with Reynard also. when you
Oh
guys were
yes.
talking.
Okay, give that example. That's the last example, because I know people might be thinking that I am some narcissistic whatever, but I'm just trying to prove the point that I'm not making this up. Give them a summarized example of the Reinhardt thing, because again, you brought that up. I didn't, even when that had happened.
Yeah, Reynard is a physics teacher, science, but physics mainly, and we were talking about light, and I can't remember the statement you brought up, but how you said it actually. You said how light isn't generally this, and then Reynard, being a physics teacher, said, "Yeah, no, that's true." And I was like, "Really? I didn't. I thought it was always this thing. I can't remember the specifics." And then and then we even were talking. You guys talked about dimensions, and he was saying, "Yeah, there's more than three. There's almost 11." I always thought that was like the conspiracy theories, like Star Trek, Star Wars kind of thing. And he's like, "No, that's general, detailed, hard." And then you guys kept on talking. And again, Reynard was speaking to you as an equal, and I remember talking to you afterwards, like, "I didn't know you knew that much about physics." And he's like, "Yeah, I did." And I was lost in the conversation.
Okay, so there we go. So this, and again, even when Nande said that to me afterwards, I was like, okay, I didn't think that was something special to know. So again, that would be me assuming everyone is up to speed with that kind of discussion that I was having with a physics teacher. So that's the point again. Okay, so a vocation can be difficult if one is trying to make a career decision between essentially equal passion, talents, and potential in violin, neurology, theoretical mathematics, and international relations, which means, and just for interest's sake, I'm not officially qualified to teach physics, but just to let you guys know, I'm planning to study physics, so I can officially teach it. I could teach it already probably, but I do understand that getting the official recognition is what I have to do. So stay tuned. I'm doing that next. Okay, here's another picture. Here's another one of the spaces that I find peace at. It's called the Mighty, and it's literally a place for people with various kinds of mental struggles, depression, autism, all of that. So here's something I posted on the 3rd of November 2019, and I said there at the bottom, my safe space. This is me retreating to the safest place in my world, my headphones. I can live with headphones on. I'm not going to go too much into that. That is in itself something that you can research if it interests you enough. I can spend an unhealthy amount of time with my headphones on, in fact. That's the thing. So next I want to introduce you to another interesting character. Some of you might know him. This is my son, Benjamin, and this is his first day at his creche, at his play school, whatever you want to call it. His face is telling a story. Benjamin is not interested in what's going on around him, and he doesn't mind if you know it. In fact, also, what I can tell you, in fact, is that Benjamin has already been diagnosed with selective mutism, which is a fancy way of saying when someone really doesn't want to talk to you, they're not going to talk to you and you won't get it out of them. He retreats into himself, and I think the picture shows you that, and that's why it's one of my favorite pictures of him. It does look like he's getting his first mugshot. And when you look at the pictures of Benjamin, other kids at the creche with Benjamin, you see what looks normal and what doesn't look normal. And let me tell you, Benjamin doesn't look normal compared to them. So he is going to be going for occupational therapy and probably confirm what I already know, which is that he is on the autism spectrum, because I see myself in him in more ways than one, not just by his looks. Um, Moving on. Sociopath versus psychopath. What's the difference? Now, this is a quote. This is from an article on MedMD, and I'm not saying it's the best place to get information like this, but it's just a place to get information. So I just want to show you some of the clips of what it says here, because we're about to now go into the biblical characters. Said I'd give you a backstory to give you an idea of what. Again, I don't mind using the term mental illness, although a lot of people would say autism is not mental illness, but I'm comfortable with people claiming that it is. I don't mind that at all. So moving now into the Bible characters to see the similar traits. Most experts believe psychopaths and sociopaths share a similar set of traits. People like this have a poor inner sense of right and wrong. They also can't seem to understand or share another person's feelings, but there are some differences too. A sociopath typically has a conscience, but it's weak. They may know that taking your money is wrong, and they might feel some guilt or remorse, but that won't stop their behavior. Both lack empathy, the ability to stand in someone else's shoes and understand how they feel. But a psychopath has less regard for others, says Aaron Kipnis, PhD, author of the Midas Complex. Someone with this personality type sees others as objects he can use for his own benefit. Now, I told you previously um, that I've dealt with all kinds of things in school as well. I've dealt with a person that I unofficially diagnosed as being a psychopath. And I did say it to people that I was working with that we've got a psychopath here and we're going to be careful. I am not pleased to announce, because I shouldn't be pleased to announce something like I'm going to say. This person was eventually, we got them to be assessed by a psychiatrist, so literally a psychiatrist, confirmed my diagnosis. Was I surprised? No, because I don't need to be a psychiatrist to know what I'm looking at. So the person was, in fact, a student in our school that is, not was, is in fact a literal psychopath. I can tell you much more stories of what I dealt with that student, but that's not going to help for tonight, really. Moving along now to start getting literally into our characters. If there's meaning in life at all, then there must be meaning in suffering. This is from Viktor Frankl. And it's a perfect introduction to our first character that I want to talk about briefly. We're going to talk about these characters briefly because you're going to know their backstories already, and you're going to kind of be able to fill in even more stories of even more characters who had different kind of mental illnesses or were really just like us, effectively, as we hope to prove tonight. So meet Jacob. Now, the reason why I put the psychopath and sociopath statement before Jacob is because I believe Jacob was a sociopath. I believe Jacob had the sense of remorse because he does show remorse for his brother after he steals from him. Or not steals, he cons his brother, who is weak and stupid enough to be conned to begin with. He does manipulate him, but I don't know, how much blame do you put on Jacob if his brother's stupid enough to fall for it and shallow enough to give up what he did? Anyway, that's a debate on its own. Fact is, Jacob is able to manipulate, and he does it very well, powerfully, in fact. Jacob has a reduced amount of remorse, enough that he's able to do these things and even spend years in that state. His name literally ends up meaning first the one who supplants. It really underhanded. It's effectively claiming that he's underhanded, which, if you study his story, is not a stretch, not a stretch of the imagination at all, because Jacob was in fact underhanded, and he kept on using that power, that intelligence, because he was intelligent too, craftiness, smartness, smooth tongue, whatever you want to call it, which in fact, I don't know if we should be proud or ashamed of this, has seeped into the Jewish nation completely. I will tell you now, and I'll make this confession in front of you, and maybe this makes me somewhat of a sociopath as well. I live by this premise. If you can't be helped to come right, if you are going to be perpetually stupid and emotionally or mentally retarded in a way that you're going to bring harm to yourself or me or others around you, if I can't help fix you and get you to get control of what's going on, here's what you can be sure of. I will manipulate your state of brokenness for your own benefit, even if you never thank me for it, and for my safety and anyone else around me. It sounds a bit disturbing. I've lost a very good friend based on this, because that person realized I could do this. And instead of just trusting that I would never negatively do it to someone like them, to the friend, they chose instead to question my friendship with them, which is sad, because I was always very open with them about that too. So a very smart person manipulates situations. And manipulate sounds terrible, but do you understand when you go to a doctor or you go to a physiotherapist, they are manipulating your body. But you wouldn't see that as negative. You'd see that as positive. So manipulate doesn't only have to be negative, although it can be used negatively. God manipulates everyone to bring about his own will. That's said throughout scripture. And again, like I'm saying, intelligent people can do that. There's that concept that everyone tends to know. I think that's called reverse psychology. You've heard of that. If reverse psychology ever works, it's a form of manipulation. But sometimes you have to do it to get something. Now, Jacob did it for good, but he did it a lot for bad as well. And in the process of him becoming a balanced character, that's when his name changes to Israel. He does a lot of this manipulation. So I'm telling you, I think Jacob was something of a psychopath. A sociopath. Next quote, yeah. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. Beautiful statement again from Viktor Frankl. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose. So I've purposely selectively put that in to introduce our next character. And I choose Moses for this one. So before I even put Moses' slide on, just think about this. For Moses, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. Moses' life is a messed up one, don't you think? He is born under very suspect circumstances, almost gets killed. There's lying involved. There's his mother having to give up her son. There's a cover up. There's getting him into the house of Pharaoh, which is manipulating the situation. So there's some sociopath stuff going on in Israel, and we're very good at that apparently, at being sociopaths to manipulate. And that's probably why a lot of nations are nervous about us. They know we're very smart and crafty, and that is probably a good reason to be scared, I guess. So that's the story of Moses, and he grows up in Pharaoh's court, and it's a very dangerous life he lives, because obviously his mother, as he's growing up, and his sister, as he's growing up, was telling him the truth. And that must be a conflicting thing. And we know Moses has a serious identity crisis, and it pretty much marks his whole life. Think about it. When Moses is called by God, what does Moses say? I don't want to do this. Get my brother, get someone else. He has a stuttering problem. And stuttering as a thing is related to feelings of inadequacy often, and emotional stuntedness, which tends to fit Moses' character perfectly. So it's not too surprising that all of those things come to bear on Moses. Who wants to give it a shot? Any other thoughts on Moses here that helps to prove that there were some struggles for him mentally and personality-wise, and can put him into some category of having mental struggle? Any ideas? Doesn't have to be extensive. Just give me some thoughts on, think of Moses' story. Anything that jumps out at you?
I wanted to challenge you on you saying God manipulates us, because we've got that against freedom of choice.
Okay. Well, we in the story of Moses, Kathy, can I offer you an example in the story of Moses that proves it?
Yeah.
Look at Pharaoh. Moses tells you that
Oh,
God.
he hardened his heart.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Thank you.
It's fun that you're challenging. You must, because this is how we wrestle through it. Now, the great thing is this. I don't believe God blinded Pharaoh. I think God just used Pharaoh's posture against him in the long run, and then drove Pharaoh further down the road he had chosen, which then means he manipulates, but he hasn't overridden Pharaoh's free will. Pharaoh's free will still got to operate. In fact, Pharaoh had multiple opportunities to repent and didn't. Before God then says, oh, well, now I'm going to force you down the road that you have explicably chosen. Does that make sense? Is everyone still there? Because I'm not hearing now.
Darren, I dare say with Moses, the first thing.
Yeah.
Moses, I think of him being insecure, being low confidence. But then I have to ask myself, then in comes Aaron to supplement as a help. In the discussing the manipulation of the situation, does it suit God's agenda in putting a flawed person into that role to more magnify his overall Moses, and being overconfident? I only go back forwarding in time to him when he loses his temper and strikes a rock, what outcome that has for him. So can you imagine, in one way, in retrospect, I suppose, not trying to be a know-it-all, but in thinking of it, how frustrating would it have been for God using Moses as how can I say, as a mechanism to bring about what he wanted to achieve? Wouldn't you have a more confident Moses jumping the gun and taking the focus off God's plan? You know, so maybe God chose him purposely because he was a weaker vessel.
No, I agree with that because, I don't know if I would say that Moses might have been overconfident. I'll tell you why I agree with you, is that I think the possibility is definitely there that God would have used it. And in using people that are weak, God does get to have the glory, which otherwise might not have been so clearly pushed towards God's side of that context. Because if the person was confident and able in and of themselves, then some of that honor could be shared, and that would obviously be a problem. So there's no doubt that that's a factor there for sure. So, and you're right, in Moses' case of striking the rock, and that does show his humanness, and I think but then again, a person could probably argue in Moses' favor that he was tired and frustrated, and anyone could be that too. So does that make sense if I say that?
Yeah, they say Moses wasn't your typical candidate for the role that God had put him into, I suppose.
Right.
And also the fact that Pharaoh would look down upon him. Pharaoh must have been aware of his personality trait and most probably sought to take advantage of Moses, possibly knowing who he was. Forget that, in his own, I know, not in the right context, because the Pharaoh wouldn't know or respect anything of a biblical nature, even if it was to come in the future. But the idea is there, in Pharaoh's eyes, he would always be the kid growing up, like the adopted kid in the household almost.
Yeah, and look, Pharaoh, and we're not going to get into that because it'll take too much time, but Pharaoh's outlook on himself was deluded too because of the culture he lived in. And God is literally using all of that situation too to bring glory to himself. So that's another form, although a lot more, how can I say, covert, like undercover, was in itself a form of manipulation too, to bring glory to himself. So yeah, God uses everything around. And maybe as another example, you can give me another example from the Old Testament where God outrightly manipulate the situation. Where's God done it? There's another very famous part in the Old Testament where God totally manipulates a situation to his own benefit. Like, seems to directly override something, in fact. Anyone got an idea? Sorry, Gary, just tell me what's going on. I'll edit it out of the session if I have to. Are you guys seeing the meet
Yeah,
Moses?
you're back to the screen. We just had a picture of your WhatsApp, but it's back now.
Okay.
But
Darren, would it
Anyone
be
know
the
which other
case?
story there is in the Old Testament?
Would it be the case where Moses is being, instructed by God to perform his tasks, and Moses says, "But I can't. I'm not capable." And he says, "Well, get your brother Aaron here." So, in a way, that's what comes to my mind. I know it's a very close context, but
That's
what I
fine.
see.
Because, Kerry, honestly, there's hundreds of examples probably. I should probably give you more information to guide you to the direction where I'm going. I'll just use this context, this point. A donkey is involved. Old Testament, donkeys involved.
Mm.
Balaam.
Right.
Mm.
He goes with the purpose of cursing, and what does he end up doing?
blessing them.
He blesses. So there's a lot of manipulation that, of course, we're not going to class anyone else manipulating, even for the good, equal to God manipulating for the good. That obviously, I'm not going to make that overlap, because that would be desperately wrong of me to do. But my point is, and I guess this is part of my point, is things are really strange in the Bible, isn't it? It's dangerously honest and dangerously psychological, for lack of a better term. And that's, again, I guess, my point. We have real people in these stories, and that's part of what I love about Scripture so much, is that it's so real, and it's people like us that would be doing things that we'd probably do if we were thrown into those situations ourselves, because these people had real personalities and real issues. And that's the context that I'm trying to paint here with what we're saying in this story. So the next quote from Viktor Frankl: man does not simply exist, but always decides what his existence will be, what he will become the next moment. By the same token, every human being has the freedom to change at any instant. I love it. It's quite a powerful statement. You decide what you will be. You decide what you're going to do moment to moment. That's influenced by a lot of things. Um, but we also have the freedom to change or not to change. And generally, we tend not to change. That tends to be the thing. We are creatures of habit, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on the context. But that ability to change is in our hands, and sometimes is very necessary. And I've chosen that as the lead in to this character, to David, who, is such a picture for me of change, of someone who can change things. I'm convinced David suffered from depression. I'm convinced that if David was alive today, he'd be diagnosed with autism, for a number of reasons. His creativeness, his radical way of being, his not having like a average, just being full tilt in everything he did. If you read his Psalms, if you watch his activities, his way of being as a human being. He was an outsider. All his life, he lived on his own. He was happy to be on his own generally. Those are all traits that would lean towards diagnosis of autism today. I've always felt an affinity with David. So, it's I see so much again in that character. And David was a real person, messy, my word. If there's anything inspiring about David, it's to actually track his life and to see how absolutely messy his existence was. And again, that shows the realness, and it's one of the things I love about Scripture that for me proves the trustworthiness of it, is that these are real people living real life events, which to me is such an important thing that I want to encourage everyone with, is to see that. And that's my goal again with a session like tonight. Obviously, there's the psychological, philosophical element to this. I've shared a lot about myself as the base, measure, the baseline measurement of what we're talking about here. But the more important thing is to talk also about Scripture and to see another way amongst the many that we always look at, just another way for us to engage with Scripture and to feel more connected to these people, more connected to these characters. Because I'm pretty soon going to tell you a very negative thing that I find in religion today and people on our side of it. Did I hear someone now?
Yeah, it's me. When you say David has autism, or one incident that reminds me of what you just spoke about earlier on, and I don't know, I want to hear if you would agree, is the incident with David and Goliath, where he kind of doesn't understand why no one's willing to go kill Goliath, and when he brings it up, he's not. He's also kind. You can tell from his demeanor that he's kind of confused why they think he won't be able to kill Goliath. He's absolutely not scared at all, and you see it in his discussion with Saul and with his brothers. Is like, why aren't you guys going to go kill this guy? Okay,
Right.
how's it?
If you gave Nanda, if you gave that story to a psychologist or anyone today, and you asked them to analyze it, not for the hope of making people inspired, just analyze this character, they would probably say this person lacks a basic fear of potential threat around them. And that's not normal, because that isn't normal. So I do think that leans towards it heavily. And I think I understand that concept completely, because that's me too. the dangerous thing with people, with someone like me, tends to be a lack of fear, where probably fear is a very useful reaction in some circumstances. So I think you've got a good example. If we studied that part of David's story, not with the hope of writing a book about, inspiring ways of overcoming your giants, but just really just studying a story, yeah, there's something off with someone who reacts that blase. That's like, what are we doing here? Why are you letting this happen? I think you've got a good example. So yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. I think it's good. So sorry, I've jumped now ahead, didn't I? So, I mean, a lot more. David's one of my favorite characters to talk about, like I said, for this reason. Reading the Psalms again, as I say, you do know that when Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? That actually comes from David. And someone who's saying that is suffering the deepest pits of depression. And again, when you read the Psalms, you find so much evidence of that kind. You find someone who's going high and low. So, I mean, some people might even diagnose David as being bipolar, and he probably fits that profile too. I wouldn't be surprised to find, if we had to actually get a proper person that's in these sciences to diagnose this character, given the information. If we took this information and we didn't tell the person, the doctor or the professional, hey, this is David from the Bible, but we just took the traits of David, I think we'd be quite shocked at where they would diagnose David's character on the scale. I think we'd find that, because we mustn't forget that, as I'm saying, these are real people. These are real people that really lived, and that's important to get. Now this slide, sorry, I'm going to read it now, but it's in the wrong position because I ended up moving this slide, or the character this slide is associated with. But I'll read it now, and then I'll remind you just now. Existential depression, this is still from that article, is a depression that arises when an individual confronts certain basic issues of existence. That's from Yalong in 1980. It's part of the paper that's been quoted. He describes 4 such issues or ultimate concerns: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. So that tends to be the triggers for depression. Now, who does that make you think of following David? Who do you think I'm going to associate that with? Following David.
Job.
Job would be one, yeah. But following David, Kathy, if you chronologically moved from David, who after David would fit that profile well?
Solomon.
Yeah. This describes Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is written by someone that should be diagnosed with existential depression. Isn't the topics freedom, death, isolation? And what is Solomon? I mustn't get into it now because we're going to get to that. So let me not jump ahead. Let's move on. I had to include a woman because I'm scared the feminists attack me and start burning bras. So let's choose a woman to talk about here. And there's actually more than one woman we could talk about. There's a lot of these too. They were also equally mad.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. You said freedom. Would that be because of inferiority?
I think, Kathy, in terms of the freedom with that existential depression, I think it's the fear of just having too much freedom and not having enough boundaries around to protect us from ourselves, even. That,
good answer. Yeah.
That existential depression scares us with. And I think a lot of people, even in relationships, end up giving up their right to freedom just because they're so scared of making wrong choices. And that opens them up to be manipulated by bad people, in especially romantic contexts. I think that tends to happen. That fear of having too much freedom is scary.
Thank you.
I'll give you an example. One of our favorite shows to watch is Friends, which is always one of the most popular shows that's ever been on TV. And there's this one situation where 2 of the friends, Rachel and Phoebe, Rachel has made some bad decisions and has an over emotional reaction, which is obviously irrational, where she literally says to her friend Phoebe, from now on, you make all my decisions. And the comedy of that is, of course, because any adult who says that is obviously acting completely irrational. And as the story carries on, we find the evidence that clearly you can't let another adult make your decisions for you. But again, it's that freedom that Rachel finds frightening after making a few bad choices that ends up showing that to be the case.
Thank you.
Now, meeting Rahab, let's say one thing about women. I love women from in so many different ways. I think women are incredible creatures. I think women are way more complex than men. I think women have certain attributes of God that men don't have that is positively fascinating and fearfully inspiring at the same time. I think the best manipulators on this planet, in fact, are women, which they are able to use for the good and for the bad. I think one thing that women generally learn to use quite powerfully is their sexuality. And that sexuality doesn't only have to be used in the sense of being physically attractive and using that in a less than moral way. I think women understand that what gets a man's ego going and pumped is to have women often act as damsels in distress. And I think a lot of women know how to use that. I think a lot of women will sometimes are capable, and ladies, you can speak, yeah, obviously can't speak from experience as a woman. I think a lot of women know how to use that and will sometimes even play dumb and play weaker than they really are for the sake of actually manipulating a man that they can see is clearly weaker than them, ironically. And so plays the man's ego up because then he lets his guard down, thinking he's going to be the alpha and save the day. And then she gets him where she wants him. Ladies, am I able to say that and get your support, or are you going to outrightly deny that?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Completely agreed, Darren.
Okay, and I mean, I'm even going to suggest you that I think women should use that, but I just hope for the most part they use it for good. Put it to you that way. Hopefully it gets used for good. I mean, Rahab, what do I need to say about Rahab? What was her profession? Anyone remember? What was Rahab's profession?
Prostitute.
Right. So I don't think I need to explain much more there. Furthermore, we know Rahab was a smart woman because when the Israelite spies come there, she doesn't waste time striking a deal. So she's not an idiot. She risks her life, of course, she does that by helping them, but she's quite calculated in knowing we're going to lose this fight. I'm getting on the winning side. Good for her. In fact, so good for her. What does God think of the actions Rahab took? Well, because of the actions Rahab took, Jesus has got a prostitute in his family history. How's that for a shocker? Anyone ever thought of it like that? Because you know Rahab's in Jesus' direct family line. Is that silence stunned silence, or is it silence because everyone already thought that and that's not too shocking for you?
Is Rahab a Gentile, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Silence because trying to flick through to find out what I did think about it. But hadn't thought of it that way.
She's in Jesus' family tree, actually acknowledged as such by Matthew. So again, turns out that we got some strange characters. And you can't tell me Rahab took a life of prostitution because that was like a noble thing to be doing then, as opposed to knowing that men have itches where they shouldn't have it as often as they do. And she was happy to scratch for them. Let's just call it what it is, because that's what it was. So clearly a crafty manipulator herself. I figured, hey, I'm gonna use what I've got. And while we're on that topic, not that she did it herself, okay, because she didn't do it herself, but her uncle or her cousin, however you want to see him. How about Esther? The most famous prostitute of human history, I would say.
Also think of Ruth, Darren.
Yeah, pretty much in the same space too. And her mother-in-law, of all people, encouraged that one. Again, the context obviously doesn't make it as disastrous as it sounds. But the point is, do these all sound like perfectly normal stories to you? You know, like, do these stories sound like happy Sunday school literature? There's some strange stuff going on here with very strange people, with very strange psychological issues and emotional issues and character issues. I mean, that's what this whole thing is about, isn't it? And that's my point again, is to say this is part of the reason why I trust scripture so much. It's its blatant honesty. It's just so desperately, blatantly honest that you can't cry foul. It's just too embarrassingly honest. Again, that would be my point with that. And I love that. But then again, being on the autism spectrum, that's a natural occurrence. People like me tend not to be easily embarrassed by revealing things that generally most people consider to be too private, if I should say that, use it that way. So that's maybe part of the reason why I get such a thrill out of scripture in that way, because I don't have those boundaries in my head, I guess. Amanda's helped me learn some of them, yes, over the time, over 15 years. As I used to say in the beginning of our relationship, I used to get a lot of sore shins when I'd be kicked under the table for saying things that probably wasn't as comfortable as I thought it was to discuss with company when Amanda and I would go out. So I have learned that through sore shins over the years, but clearly probably not as much as I should already. So my point is, all these characters are real people. And I'm going to now lead into where I think is a very negative and unfortunate reality that happens in Christianity. Based on what I've just said, based on the reality of what the world is like and how things actually are, I think there is a pocket of Christianity that's very dangerous in the perception that it pushes out. And this is how I want to introduce it, because this is what it looks like in the image they project. Now, I've got to tell you this, Kerry, just be careful. Gary's going to get very excited. He might jump up and down with excitement and go grab a couple of books soon. And Nandi, your family too, sitting with you, needs to just be careful that they're not too close to you, because you might get overexcited now too. Because I'm about to introduce to you one of Gary and Nandi's favorite, two of their favorite Christian authors that I know they can't get enough of. Because we're about to discuss how Christian authors are here to save the day. So if you were ever worried, breathe a sigh of relief. And the best way to show this to you is I've got to share the magic of this with you. Because here's Nandi and Gary's favorite author, Joel Osteen, with this book that I can't wait to get my hands on, God's Best for You. You need to see this video because I don't want you to miss this. So just have a listen to this.
As a thank you for your support of our ministry this month, Joel and Victoria would like to send you a copy of Joel's new devotional, God's Best for You. Joel Osteen will encourage you every day, equip you to pray big prayers, and build your faith to receive all that God has in store for your life.
God has amazing things in your future. When you take the limits off of Him and pray bold prayers, you're going to see uncommon blessings, unusual increase, and unprecedented favor. He's going to take you further than you've ever dreamed.
This devotional is filled with encouragement and inspiration. Request your copy today. It will help you live the best life that belongs to you.
Request your copy of God's Best for You today.
Okay, I know Gary and Nandi probably want to comment on their favorite authors. So you guys can have a minute, but don't make it too long.
No comment.
Thank you, Gary. I least said the better.
You know, when I saw this video today, looking into this to see what books Joel has given us, I look at this picture and God's best for you. And I'm not sure if Joel Osteen is selling God or furniture, because I'm not sure what God's best for you has to do with a couch and two small tables. It's so trendy that it's mesmerizing by its trendiness. And if you paid attention in that video, Joel is going to do all of these things for you. And if you listen to what I think is his wife, because I think it's her, um, God's got something for your future. And I'm always surprised with these Christian authors that the new thing is going to happen once you get their book. Somehow everything before that doesn't matter and it was terrible, but you just get this book and then you're going to learn these things. I mean, if you listen to that audio clip, you're going to pray big prayers. I have no idea what a big prayer would be. And yes, there's sarcasm in what I'm saying because it's better than swearing. So please take the sarcasm instead. And the frustration for me is because people are buying into this. Now, this is going to sound terribly bad for me to say this. The book on the right hand of your screen, Unlock Your Potential, Becoming Your Best You. I can't help but ask Dr. Miles Monroe, how's that worked out for him? Does anyone know what happened to Dr. Miles Monroe?
No.
Dr. Miles,
No,
Dr. Miles Monroe and Hansi Cronje have something in common. They both lost their life in a tragic, and I will call it tragic, airplane accident flying into the side of a mountain. I don't know about you, but I'm not expecting my books about creaming humanity and becoming a god effectively with keys on my book to be good for my sales when on my way to my next way to unlock the power of God in the world, I fly into a mountain. And I know that sounds terribly insensitive, but the point is, you don't get to stand and start telling people that you've got the secrets of existence when you're dead. Now, I know Miles Monroe fans would not be happy to hear me say that, but I'm afraid it is a valid point. You don't get to be standing, and what you often find, I mean, this is probably one of the, for both these guys, very unique because most of the time they are prominent features on their book covers. T.D. Jakes does the same. Joseph Prince tends to get younger every year, not older, and his hair gets better. I don't know what hair products he uses, but they're always on their book covers. That you're not quite sure what we're buying or selling here. Is it God or is it them? And again, that is sarcasm because, again, the alternative is to be swearing quite literally. And my problem with this stuff, again, is innocent, hopeful, desperate, broken, scared people are making these men rich. And their problems aren't going away. Any comments on that? And if you think I'm being way too nasty, hell, I might even apologize. So don't hold back. If you think I've been too cutting or whatever, if you can prove to me that I'm going way over the top, I'll even apologize.
As I
Darren?
said, as I always say, where was John? Where was John the Baptist? Where was Peter and the apostles' best life?
Good point. That is a very fair point. Dad?
Well, it speaks of idolatry because the key word in the main emphasis is you in both books. So to me, my simple way of understanding it is, what can I get out of the best deal? How can I manipulate God or his word to get the best outcome for me, which ultimately, looking at it in both cases, is like the art of the deal, as Donald Trump would put it. what's the best deal I can manipulate out of by manipulating God's word, me taking license with what they're saying. But the issue is not, Lord, what can I do for you? You know, it seems, and I only ask myself why these mega churches and prosperity cults are doing so well today and still continue to have a huge following, is because at the heart of it is, what can I get out of this deal, and not what can I do for God.
It does come down to that, yes. And again, my argument is in the interest of the innocent people who buy into this. I've dealt with enough of them. I've dealt with enough of them that are broken, because you know what they end up asking themselves, and because I've dealt with so many of them, I can tell you this. What am I doing wrong? Because it's not working for me. So then they assume they're doing something wrong. And that's even more devastating. Does that make sense? And that's what gets me angry. Look, honestly, I couldn't give a flying fig in Israel what Joel Osteen believes or what Dr. Miles Monroe believed in their own world of this. And I'm not saying I don't want them to have salvation. It's not my business. Whether or not they have the real Jesus is not my business in this context, please, to try and determine, because I haven't studied what they believe about Jesus personally. Clearly, these books are not about that. These books are about self-help. And that's what I'm debating and negatively attacking. I am absolutely doing that because of the people, again, that I say I've dealt with, who come broken because they think they've done something wrong, because they're not getting the results that Miles and Joel told them should be coming their way. And that's when it becomes a problem that upsets me. And I think it's rightfully so. Again, I'm not speaking in some bubble. I'm speaking from literal experience of having dealt with enough of these people to know this is, and it's unfair. It's people who are broken and just need to know the truth about the world they live in. And this is not the truth, that you can have your best life now and all of that nonsense and the 5 keys to unlocking the kingdom principles of God knows what. It's sickening, actually, is what it is. And it's dangerous because it's going to hurt people. And that's where it becomes a problem. Where I've modeled for you from the start what I think is the right way. Leaders should be dangerously open about who they are. And that's the model that I've always modeled. Because if I don't model that, I can give the people who follow me the false impression that I have it all together in ways that I really don't. And then I'm inadvertently hurting those people, and I don't want to do that. So I hope that makes sense when I talk like this. Next one, Viktor Frankl again. What is to give light must endure burning. I love that one from him too. What is to give light must endure burning. So in other words, effectively, Viktor Frankl is saying suffering is like inevitable if something good's going to happen. And we saw with one of his previous quotes, he speaks like that in any case. So this is a perfect entry into this character. Meet Paul, one of my favorite people who I believe too, again, if he's got the confidence and it falls into scripture to tell men to cut their own penises off, then I think you are safely in the realm of someone on the autism spectrum if he was to be diagnosed today. And I think that's part of the reason why I often see so much of myself in Paul. And other people tell me I'm like Paul too. And I don't think that is a compliment or a negative. I just think that's people seeing obvious traits between two people with the same psychological disposition. Did you know Paul said this? I am talking like a madman. I deliberately left off the reference. You can go find it for yourself, but it's there. I'm talking like a madman. Paul was very off the wall. Paul was not your run-of-the-mill person, and he definitely didn't mince his words. Nandi and I were talking the other day that when you go into the Greek concept of a lot of what Paul says, Paul actually swears in Greek. Nandi, did you find that to be true when you researched a bit or not?
Yes, he did. He did swear in Greek.
Okay, so in Greek culture at the time, the words Paul used, there's context where Paul was literally swearing. And that makes it into scripture. So do with that what you will. Was Paul suicidal? Yeah, to some extent. And I think he longed for death, which makes him suicidal. And normally when people read this scripture, it's in a very positive way. And I'm not saying you shouldn't read it as positive, because to be with Jesus would be beautiful. But tell me, if you're alive and you're desperate to be with Jesus, which would kind of imply most likely death, what does that mean you are tending towards in your head? If you're alive and you're saying you'd rather be with Jesus, and you understand what happens to people who reach a certain age or leave this world, what are you then? Anyone brave enough to say it? What do we call thoughts like that?
Suicidal.
Yeah. So Paul was suicidal. Imagine that. And yet, in this context, if you know this passage well, what does he say? But, and it's like he's talking within himself. And listen, people probably, when they watch me in the car, when I'm driving, probably think I've got Bluetooth phone calls going, because I talk out loud to myself. Have I recorded me talking out loud to myself at those times, and then I let other people read or write down, and then let them read or listen to what I say? Some conversations we have with ourselves is probably not something that you comfortably want everyone around you to see or to hear, because it's very revealing, and it's maybe you in the midst of a serious struggle mentally within yourself, which is what we all go through. Don't you get the feeling that this portions like this of Paul's writing is that happening, like just flowing out of him, that probably would have been better left with the inside of himself? It's like he's saying, I actually want to be with Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but it doesn't sound like much of a compliment or an exciting, inspiring statement. If I had to tell all of you, you know what, guys, I rather wish I was dead, but, I guess I'm here to help you guys. Would you feel particularly special if I said that? Or would you be a little bit worried for my mental state and wonder, should we be getting Darren on suicide watch? Where would you feel if you heard me say that? You'd never heard it from Paul. He didn't say it. I'm the first one saying it. What would you think of that? If you heard me say, I actually just really wish I was off this planet, but I guess since you guys are here, I'll have to be here and I'll do some work with you. Give me an honest opinion. Try and forget that Paul has said this. And what would your, I almost want to say, virgin reaction to that, because you've never been experienced to that before? Even just one thought on that from anyone?
Well, I would be sad.
Why? You'd answer, but why?
I guess because I think in the now rather than the future.
Right. And that's not bad, Kathy. You know what? If you told me you'd be somewhat insulted, I'd understand that too. Because it doesn't say much for, you could take that a little bit personally.
Yeah.
And yeah, Paul's writing it. I mean, this ends up in what we now call scripture. Are we, throughout the pages of scripture from Genesis to Revelation, are we not being exposed to some extent to the stuff that probably would have been better left or generally left in people's personal diaries that no one else ever reads, is now part of scripture that influences and shapes our very hope and future in our faith? You get that? Like, there are people with some serious mental breakdowns, and their experiences are forever, or at least till the end of time, recorded as part of our sacred scripture. Kathy, do you get that? Can you reason that out, that that's literally what's happening?
Yes, and I also think that I would feel selfish, because I would be living in the now, and I don't want them to go just yet, or you to go just yet.
Sure. And the thing is this, Kathy, Paul's conclusion is actually that he's wrong. You get that, huh? He's effectively saying, well, I actually want to go, but in reality, I need to be here because I've got work to do with you. So Paul's actually probably, self-soothing, coaching, psychologizing himself to say, okay, no, come on, pull yourself together. You got to
Yeah,
be
he's talking about his feelings and not about his ministry.
right. You see that? So he's actually having a very personal moment that slips into what you and I are calling scripture today. And that's a fascinating and beautiful thing at the same time.
But Darren, in saying that, comparatively speaking, when the revelation of God's plan for Paul's life, and any of us at any stage of our journey with the Lord could make that statement, because if the kingdom to come, the millennial reign, is something to really look forward to and aspire to. So comparatively speaking, you could say that doesn't necessarily mean that he's every minute of the day he hated what his life was like and he wanted to die. That would be suicidal. But where it says you must love the things of God more than your earthly life, doesn't mean you must divorce your parents, for instance.
Right.
Comparatively speaking, so one must be careful that you don't send out a negative message as well, which is false in itself.
Right. But without a doubt, Paul had mental struggles too, serious, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. If you read properly through his letters, it's all over the place emotionally, and he's very vulnerable in it. Yes, he's attacking and he's fighting sometimes, but he also gets very vulnerable at times. And you can tell his anguish. And Bible characters, the heroes, the prophets were often very disturbed people. I mean, Nandi, wasn't it you and I that was talking about it? Why do I think it was us? Yeah, Nandi and I were talking the other day about Ezekiel with the prophets of Baal, or Elijah, sorry, with the prophets of Baal. And Nandi, you tell it, because I know you love telling that part of the story. Tell them.
It's Elijah, right?
Yeah.
Let's confuse them. It's a famous biblical story. He's going doing a face off with the prophets of Baal because they've taken over Israel. With who's that infamous woman in the Tanakh?
Jezebel.
Yeah, there we go, Jezebel, and dubbed the worst king of Israel, Ahab, and they say whose God can bring down fire, and so the 70 prophets of Baal all they start preaching and praying and taunting, and then they start cutting themselves. They start cutting themselves, and then is what's the name again? Isaiah, right? Elijah says he starts taunting them. He's like, maybe he's sleeping. Shout a bit louder. But one of my favorite ones is that maybe he's busy taking a dump. That's why he can't hear you right now. He literally says so. And in the Hebrew, it's very graphic.
It's crass, yeah.
Yeah, it's very crass. He says maybe he's relieving himself. That's why he might be a bit busy right now. He says that in front of the whole of Israel.
Isn't that interesting? Does that sound like a very balanced individual to you? Because I don't think so. I mean, Paul fits that category too. So we're not dealing with the kind of guys that you probably would expect to hope that your daughter brings home one day, kind of thing. These people are different.
I think even Saul, Paul's namesake, but he's more of a negative. But he's also I think he calls David a son of a whore.
He was desperately insecure. That man. Saul was a basket case. Mentally.
In his anger, he calls his own son David also, but he calls his own son the son of a whore.
Yeah. And then in the midst of all of that, you got Joel Osteen and Dr. Miles Monroe with books, not just these two, and other books that you'd swear they found some secret that no prophet ever knew, that Paul clearly didn't know, that I can't imagine knowing. And that's again my point. It would be laughable if it wasn't so tragically dangerous. Now, I wouldn't read these two books if you gave it to me for free or paid me. But I'm going to tell you one book I might actually be buying soon is this one. Everything is effed. And I actually contemplated just saying the word because I love that word. I'm not going to lie to you. I just think it captures the heart of something that's stuffed. But for the sake of sounding a lot more spiritually superior and amazingly holy, I've decided I won't do it. It's a wonderful word that when you actually study its meaning, actually is quite a descriptive word in describing what it tries to do. And I think part of the reason why this book is a bestseller is because of that word that everyone seems to actually understand very well. And please note already, I've already pointed out that people like Elijah and Paul have actually used swear words in their day to accurately, poetically describe things too. So if I'm not holy enough for you, I can't even apologize. I hope you can get over it if that bugs you so much. But I think that word works well. The furthest I can go in trying to act as a gentleman in this case is to say it the way I did, because I am actually comfortable with just saying the word, to be honest with you. I won't make like I'm not. But I want to do, while that book is on the screen with that title, Everything is Effed. And just for the people that are going to just hear the audio, you'll be able to find this book if you look it up for yourself, if you couldn't imagine what word that is supposed to be. Here's quotes from Paul again. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So I don't know. To me, it sounds like everything is, well, you know what, if you read Paul there. So they are without excuse, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory for the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things, which tends to make me think that everything is, you know what. And then also, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. So we are fragile. We are, we are prone to brokenness effectively if we're in jars of clay. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. And therefore, everything is, and as you can see from the subtitle, a book about hope. So what this book is actually going to end up doing, it's going to tell you the honest truth about reality, but then it's still going to say to you there is actually hope if you know where to look. But when you go back to the books like Joel Osteen and Miles Monroe and company, they have found possibly the world's best weed, and they write those books in that state because they don't seem to live in the same world I live in, or that Paul lived in for that. I don't know about the rest of you. Maybe you live in the world where Miles Monroe lived. Sadly, I have to say lived because he's not around, so I still don't know what that's supposed to do with his book sales. But Joel Osteen is still around. And guys, I know it sounds terrible to say this, but I'm just going to be honest. I couldn't stop focusing on Joel's face because it honestly, and I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to be honest about what I saw. It looks like he got too much Botox on the one side and not enough on the other side because his face is pulling desperately wrong. That man is so clearly had Botox that's ironic for me too. And I know it sounds terrible and superficial to say that, but I'm just being honest. When I looked at that video, I couldn't even listen to what they were saying. I had to watch it about 4 or 5 times just to get over that and to start listening to what they're saying. And it looks to me like Joel Osteen is going grey. So I don't know. It seems like he's still prone to the same entropy that we all are, that we decay. So how are you selling a book about everything's fantastic when you're clearly going down the route of death, like the rest of us, in fact? I don't think he's found the fountain of youth. Clearly not. And that's also why clearly taking the Botox he clearly is doing. And that is actually a viable thing. It's not just some nasty comment to make. Because when you're selling everything is going to be fine and everything is going to be perfect, it's not good for marketing when you are clearly showing signs of aging, which is not a positive. Aging is a sign of death. So Joel is like the rest of us, that being my point. Miles Monroe has already proven that to us by what's happened to him. And God bless his soul. I do hope he died having Jesus. So I'm not questioning his salvation or his right to it in and of himself. I do think what these men do is dangerous, though, as I've already explained. And looking at the things Paul says here further explains why I think it's so dangerous. When desperate people who are looking for hope then end up buying into that delusion, and I will call it a delusion without question. So I have a thought, and I was thinking today about this, and I thought, you know what? If Joel and guys like Miles Monroe can do it, maybe I can too. So I've come up with a possible book title for myself, and please appreciate the artistry of this because this wasn't done haphazardly. How's this for the unveiling of my book? What do you guys think of it? I'm not as I have tried to do the regular thing, which is to have 90% of myself in the picture of the book cover. I am obviously trying to borrow from Joel Osteen's Live Your Best Life Now, but I just think I want to rather invite you to live real life now. And my subtitle is not probably going to sell as well as theirs does. P.S. Sometimes it sucks because, well, that's what I found with life. Sometimes it sucks. Due to no mistake of my own directly, it does sometimes just suck. And if you can't read the spine of the book that's laying flat, I did have to make this disclaimer as well to protect myself in the future before I print these books. And it does say Joel Osteen does not support the message of this book, which is why you can trust it. So I don't know. Nande, Gary, can I send you guys a copy so long?
Yeah, no, I like the photo too. It's real.
I'm trying to go with that deep look that says to you, I've got all the answers. Jesus.
Although you could have possibly used Benjamin's first day of Kennedy photo.
Yeah, that too. That looks pretty serious too. But you see, I don't know if I've got my finger high enough on my chin. I don't know how long these guys have worked on it. I've seen them all do it. Joel and Miles Monroe have done it more than once in their book. So, I'm trying, but it's my first time. I might need to work on it. But I just thought,
Darren,
if this is how we do it, then I want to just get in on that action.
Darren, I can give you a clue and some advice how you can multiply your first book sales and break every record.
Okay.
For a small fee, I, as the author, Darren Jonker, can substitute your photo in the title of on the front page, and that'll boost your sales even more.
That's possible. That could actually really work because this is an egotistical enterprise in any case. So that could very much work too, yes. Now,
when you say enterprise, are you wearing a shirt from Star Trek?
Kathy, that would have been fantastic. It's actually the Flash. So also a superhero, really effectively. So I guess we are still in that space of awesomeness. So, some people say sarcasm is the lowest form of wit, which it possibly is at times. And obviously this was done with absolute artistry in sarcasm. But I also say this to those people that say, oh, sarcasm, the lowest form of wit. Then I say, well, it's either the lowest form of wit or the regular standard when you're dealing with idiots. And I'm not suggesting that the people I'm talking to are idiots. I'm suggesting that the reality I'm poking fun at is idiotic, because I do believe it is. I believe it's absolutely idiotic. And that's what I intend for with this little sarcasm bit that I've done. Because, I was looking at these book covers today, and when you look through all these different books, I'm like, I see T.D. Jakes on the cover. I see Joel Osteen on the covers. I see Joseph Prince. That's Nandi's other favorite. I know Nandi loves him. He's probably going to post up in the room of Joseph Prince. These guys are 90% of their own covers. Like the name of the book is small, their photo is big, because we're actually selling them. And that's the shocker of this. Let me tell you another shocker. Yeah, in South Africa, we've got a Christian bookshop called Kum Books. If you go through Kum Books, you'll find that about 60 to 70% of the books are these self-help stuff. There's more books about what diet to be eating and some doctor giving you apparently biblical diet advice, which is shocking on its own to me. And there is literally, I kid you not, I've taken photos of this before, one little sad rack that stands in the middle of the shop that says Bible reference. So all these other books are, and there's storybooks, of course, too, and there's novels, which are fine. There's a place for it. I'm not saying there's not a place for those. But to find that in a Christian bookshop, the smallest shelf is reserved for reference material from the Bible, that starts saying a lot to me. And you don't have to guess who's on their bestseller lists in those things. I don't think my book's going to make it there, though. I think I might lose people with Sometimes It Sucks. I might not get them buying the book. Look, they might be on the verge when they see my finger placement on my chin, but I think then when it comes to Sometimes It Sucks, I might lose them. But anyway, moving on. We can see about me selling that book later. Again, talking about Paul further, yeah? So we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away. Our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentarily affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. How on earth could you ever buy another Joel Osteen book after reading Paul that says this? Yeah, Paul is telling you that this stuff is going to suck sometimes. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be bad. You're going to suffer. But don't worry, there's something better coming. How do you tie that in with Joel Osteen and co and the gang saying the things they do? For in this tent we groan. I mean, does that sound like a cover, a book title for one of these guys' books? Longing to put our heavenly dwelling, to put on our heavenly dwelling, which again implies leaving this world. If indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked, for while we are still in this tent, we groan, being burdened. What? This is Paul. We're being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but that we be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has spared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. Again, he's telling you the better thing is coming. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body. There, Paul's saying it again, and at home with the Lord. So whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. So Paul's constantly talking between these things, and he's saying, you know, obviously to be with Jesus is better. No logical human being can argue that fact. But the fact that we argue that implies what? That being here is going to suck sometimes. It's difficult because everything is, you know what. So I don't know how we marry it up with those Christian authors that are going to save the day. And that's my point. That's my argument. That's my ongoing criticism of them. I'm not criticizing them as human beings and whether or not they get salvation. That's not my business. I'm not going there. I am attacking the ministry and what I believe it does to innocent, desperate people. Okay, so I quoted that thing earlier about the existential depression stuff again, and it obviously relates to Solomon. So just a very few evidences here to show you that other people are wondering if Solomon was depressed. So if you look at these, and these are just the headings, we're not obviously going to read all of these. Mental health today, was King Solomon depressive? And they quote one of the most dangerous things Solomon said. Why is Solomon so depressed in Ecclesiastes? And then I've got another one. In the book of Ecclesiastes, was Solomon clinically depressed? I mean, clearly, anyone who's paid any real attention to that book has to know whoever wrote this stuff was not doing well while writing it, at least. And then I've handpicked some of what he says. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. That's from Ecclesiastes 2. I mean, that's like not very inspiring, is it? And this is in Scripture. You can imagine again, Solomon wouldn't have sold much copies of Ecclesiastes if he was a Christian author. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart is great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also but a striving after wind. He's telling you again, good grief. No matter which way you turn, there's a bit of hopelessness in some ways everywhere. And you just got to start getting in touch with reality around you. It's not always great. Another one from Solomon, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. So at the end of Solomon's writing, his conclusion is what? Fear God, do what he says, because that's where you're going to find meaning and purpose. Isn't that a great conclusion? After rambling on depressively, which he does do, literally, you can't avoid that, he ends up saying that, you know what the conclusion is? The smartest man in the world? My conclusion is fear God and do what he tells you, because that's where you're going to find the best you can find. And that to me is the exciting part. I'm saying to you, let's stop acting like everything is peachy and perfect all the time. Let's get real with each other about sometimes it does suck. Living the real life does suck. And if we can just be more honest with each other about that, maybe we can help each other better and pray for each other more and stop acting like we got it all together. That's why I just wish everyone would get autism. I say this a lot, and I know it sounds like I'm being funny, but I'm not. Because when you've got it and you can just be comfortable with that, you know how many times people ask me at school, oh, how are you doing? And then I start telling them, actually, I don't feel happy today. Today sucks actually a bit. They don't know what to do with themselves. But you asked me, how am I doing? You must see the look on their faces. Some of them have stopped asking because I think they're scared of the answer. But it feels better to me just to be honest. Oh, I'm fine. No, I'm not actually fine. Why am I going to tell you I'm fine if I'm not fine? It's very freeing. That's why I say you should try it sometime instead of acting like everything's perfect. Now, Dad, you're going to love this next one. Can you remember a long time ago, Dad, back in Royal Park, you started wrestling with some thoughts on how do we tackle our own insecurities and our own mental struggles. And you came up with a term that had kind of like a kind of self-defense label to it. Can you remember what that was that you said? That you must deal with your problems and your struggles and your challenges. I remember it. I don't know if you do.
I feel vaguely remember. Yeah, I think it's a matter of turning a defeat into an opportunity for growth. I can't remember the exact. I know what you're saying. I just got. What you said something about God's opportunities. What? Our failures, God opportunity.
Use the term with your struggles and your problems, and when it's getting you down in depression or whatever, pull a judo move on it. Can you remember that? That's what you said. You said you must pull a judo maneuver on it and throw it over using the judo analogy. And the reason why I'm pointing that out now is because I think you're going to be quite impressed with what I'm going to put on the screen now. This is literally taken with that title. This is literally taken from Shabbat.org, which is kind of like your pen. Okay, I'm back. Everyone's still there. Sorry, I'm now wrong there. I'm back. Are you able to talk?
Can't hear you properly. It sounds a bit muffled.
Are you hearing me there? Sorry, let me just check again.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. We are literally close to the end, so don't worry. We are literally a minute or two from the end. We won't be. Where did I lose you? What was I saying when I...
You were saying that turning a failure into an opportunity.
Okay.
I think I once said to you when you were going through a real bad time, I said,
Are you there still there? I'm not hearing you.
yeah, I think one of the times I said to you and was when it was like an absolute low moment. And I said, you've got to be almost have a Balaam moment. You've got to become stubborn, almost
Right.
defy the circumstances which you find yourself in.
But prior
And
to that, what you had said, I don't know if you'll remember this, you literally used the term, the metaphor of, you said, take your situation and pull a judo move on it. Can you remember that?
that's right. Yeah. Oh, you know where I might have come up with, it wasn't my idea. I can't take credit for it. But it was part of my EE3 evangelistic training, um, where they would say if somebody gives you an answer in sort of criticizing your belief, take the information they give you and then have a comeback. You come back stronger. So
Sure.
don't
No, but
take
this,
every.
yeah, this context was different because you were doing other research.
Uh,
Because I remember you shared it with me, and it related more directly to people with depression and struggles and adversities that you couldn't get over, that you weren't going to easily, that could destroy you. But if you just find a way to flip it over, you can repurpose the negative that was happening to you.
oh yeah, I think it had more to do when I said you become stubborn. You got to actually use. It was. There's a number of busy mind like mine. There was always something brewing. One of the things comes to mind. I know exactly what you're saying. Um, it's like almost reinvent yourself. You're going through a difficult time. Um, but yeah, I think I know what you're saying. It basically is you out of your hopelessness, um, you get a new zest for life, and
Yeah.
you decide. It's like an absolute stubbornness and an absolute
Yes.
refusal
It is
to
that.
be taken down. And I find it at work very often. There's times that I just uh, have to start over again. I've got to, and I always say it's a fool who never learns from his mistakes.
Right.
And and I think not having a super high confidence, it's sometimes easier to change oneself or to regroup and press the reset button. You know,
Yeah.
no, I'm not coming out right, but I understand where you're going with it, and yes, it is the case. Yeah.
So look at
And
this. Check what's on the screen, and then you'll get a better idea of why it made me think of what you had said. Paradoxically, then, depression contains the key to its own demise. This is now from that Shabbat.org. Um, so let me just get that. Are you guys still there? Sorry, I've just got this. Is it not dropped that again? Is everyone still there? My computer has a time limit that I had set that it tells me when I've been on too long. So it's actually trying to tell me I'm on too long. But I obviously want to get this done. We're almost done. So my computer's just trying to look after me, I guess, because I told it to.
Yeah, we can hear you, but we've got the whole screen with your slides at the side.
Okay, so let's get that back on. Are you seeing it properly there again? Okay, that should be the last
Yes.
interruption we have. So paradoxically, then depression contains the key to its own demise. It can be fought in kung fu fashion, using its own power against it. Depression argues that you're worthless, hopeless scum in whom nobody would ever take interest. So agree with it. Tell it back. You're absolutely right. I'm even less than that. I was created with a purpose that I've not lived up to. I've messed up again and again. And yet, nevertheless, I have a God who has put up with me despite my failures, who continues to ask me to be his agent in his world, eagerly awaiting my mitzvahs, that's activity, that's good works, it's ministry that you do, looking forward to me sharing my concerns with him 3 times a day, because generally Jews, we pray 3 times a day. Not that you have to, not telling everyone that's the way you get through to God, to get the better connection. My purpose still lies before me, and whatever of it I can fulfill, even for a moment, is worth more than all the pleasures of the Garden of Eden. And that is, I love that. That is a way to take depression even and say, you know what? Okay, you want to be around? Let's use you. Let's analyze what you give me to work with, and I will work with that. to get to where I need to go. And I love that reasoning. I think that's fantastic reasoning, in fact. Not saying that
It takes
depression is
away the
easy to deal
power,
with.
doesn't it?
Right, that's the thing. It's to just outpsych your own psychological shortcoming, in a way, to put it that way. Here's another secret of depression's utility. For a tiny seed to become a great oak, it must become rotten cellulose in between. For an olive to give its oil, it must be crushed. For an artist to produce great art, he must travel through yet another birth canal of darkness. For any human being to reach great heights, he must first touch the lowly ground. And that is true. And this is not to say we must all get excited about depression and long for it, but it's to say sometimes getting real is to face that and to sit with that and to think and to say, okay, this isn't good and I can't stay here forever and I've got to get out of this. But let's actually think about where I'm at right now and what do I do with this. I remember I had to go through that. I had severe bouts of depression. And I remember the one night just saying, okay, I'm going to need to tell myself something about this or this is going to kill me. And I remember saying to myself, every time depression hits, see it like a mist, see it like a fog. That's terrible because it's blocking my view and it's not a nice place to be. But to remind myself, this fog does not define who I am. And you know, one of the times I had to do it, I'll never forget it. I was literally washing dishes in my parents' house when in the midst of a serious bout of depression. Because guess what? Even when you're depressed, the dishes still have got to get washed. How's that for a book title? Because being depressed doesn't allow for the whole world to stand still. I can't say, oh, sorry, I'm pressing pause on reality. I'm just going to have a depression right now. If you can just get back to me later. And I sometimes think that that's part of where the secret is in those struggles is to say, life's going on. Even while yours is falling apart, life is actually still going on. So if I can learn to keep on going on while it's happening, not making like it's not happening, because that's dangerous, I think. To make like it's not happening when you hit with depression and things like that, that's dangerous and will do harm to you. You got to acknowledge it, you got to face it, you got to respect that it's there, but you also got to take it head on. And I think that's an important thing as well. 2 slides to go. We are almost done.
Darren,
Yes.
well, that scripture just, it's one of my most motivating scriptures, is that where it says, "For I know in whom I have believed and am persuaded that he's able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day."
Yeah.
That is
Beautiful.
one of the most liberating emotionally, spiritually, and physically, um, because I know that in the current circumstance, I'm hopeless. But I know of somebody who is bigger than my problem, and I know
Right.
that, that there's a hope and a future in Messiah, and that's not pie in the sky. That's a
Exactly.
reality, and because it speaks of what is to come, and not the year now where I am in, and in my doom, very depressing situation I might find myself. But there's a hope and a future which is in Messiah.
And I think it also gives a reality, understanding, depth, and 3 dimensions to things.
It does. It can and it should. And Kathy, again, this is it. If we can talk more openly about when we go through that stuff, guess what we're going to start finding? We are not nearly as alone in it as we thought we were. But
Yeah.
if we're coming out of the space that oftentimes Christianity or workspaces encourages, this false, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. That's a lie. When you aren't actually fine, then you create these false levels of success or emotional mental balance that probably no one actually has, if that makes sense. So that's what I'm encouraging to say. We've got these characters in the Bible that definitely were flawed, that struggled with all of these things, like us. I've given myself as the perfect example of someone who's definitely not normal by anyone's standards. And my sister asked a good question: what is normal? And I agree, what is normal? But definitely some of us are less normal than others if we were going to look for a description. And my hands up, number one, I think I am close to insane, honestly. I work hard against it, and I have to work hard against even my own natural inclinations not to take over, because I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a worker at school. I don't get to have all of the negatives of my own makeup take control every time. I've got to fight them when they're negative. I don't get to just hide behind them because they're there. So there's responsibility in all of this. And again, this quote from Viktor Frankl is exactly where I want to take us with this. For in the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers, the truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. Viktor Frankl again. So his conclusion is there's a lot of bad in the world, but love will ultimately prevail, and that's what we're going to aim towards. Few things that I need to tell you. Who is Viktor Frankl? Because I mean, I've been quoting this guy throughout, and I haven't told you yet who he is. Let me show you who he is. Maybe you would be surprised, maybe you're not surprised, but listen to this. In 1942, Frankl and his parents, wife, and brother were arrested and sent to the I think it's Theresienstadt um, concentration camp. Frankel's father died there within 6 months. Over the course of 3 years, Frankel was moved between four concentration camps, including Auschwitz, where his brother died and his mother was killed. Frankel's wife died at Bergen-Belsen when Frankel's camp was liberated in 1945. This man lost everyone but one sister who ended up immigrating to Australia. He learned of the death of all of his immediate family members, with the exception of his sister who had immigrated to Australia. In the camps, Frankel and fellow prisoners made an effort to address the despondency they observed in other inmates. In an effort to prevent suicide attempts, Frankel and others tried to help other inmates facing severe depression by encouraging them to reflect on positive memories, scenes, and thoughts. Here's a man, Jewish, loses everything. He was a psychiatrist before the Holocaust, and after again, he continued to study. He actually studied into things like existential depression, a concept called existential therapy, and that too. He's famous actually for certain of these theories that he proposed. He wrote a book, the Meaning of Life, or, yeah, what's the meaning of life? It's something to that extent. It's a book I actually want to read because I've just heard so much good things about it. And I've quoted some of these, or Man's Search for Meaning. A lot of these quotes I've taken is literally actually from that book, in fact. So you're looking at a picture of a man who lost everything. And in the midst of losing everything, while people were wanting to commit suicide around him, what was he doing? Sowing hope, teaching them how to survive. Now, if you think back to all the quotes I gave you of Frankl, it might start making more sense. How strong did this man have to stay, learning that he's lost he's lost everyone in his immediate family? And yet, after coming out of that, being liberated, he goes on to give untold value to the psychological sciences, with books and research that he did. And this is my thing again, is to show you, like he says in the quotes I've shown you, it oftentimes comes down to choice. Looking, and it doesn't come down to choice, doesn't mean that Frankl didn't ever struggle with depression and stuff like that. Quite the opposite, in fact. But he's saying, what if there's another way to do this? What if we just deal with and face that we are in a terrible situation, but what if we find hope somewhere else? And now, I'm not saying he was overtly religious, because I don't believe he was, but he understood the concepts of love. And no doubt, concepts that he'd learned within Judaism, even culturally, had helped him process and make sense of what's going on in the world around him. And that's the encouraging thing about this, that a man that could have gone through that and still stay positive, anyone can do it then. And we need to do that, because you know what? These people in the Bible, people like me, people like you, people like anyone I could use, we're all just like you and you like us, and we have personalities and we have types, and we use these labels that are sometimes negative and maybe not always fair, but they help functionally take us from one point to the next, and we shouldn't be too afraid of them, and we don't have to let the negative stigma of them stick to us. if we don't. And if we know we have certain traits, wear it like a badge, even if it's things you got to work on, because it doesn't help making like it's not there when you absolutely know it is. And that would be my thoughts for another very long session. So Nande, can I get you to guide us here again?
No problem, dear. Let's see, Kathy, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to add that what gave Frankel strength was helping others.
Yep, right.
And I found that when I was going through difficult things was, you know, thinking of my children before anything. And that's what gave me strength.
Good.
Thank you so much for all this research and all the backstory and all the proof that you give us from scripture. And, you know, finding just about everything in the Bible, you know, like Paul talking like a madman. And yeah, it's just wonderful. And I so appreciate it and I so look forward to it. And yeah, I just think it was wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing so much about yourself, which also gave us a deeper understanding. And yeah, it was very, very good. And I'm going to pass it on to this friend of mine who didn't join us, and suggest she listens to the recording because it was just, it's so good. And I'm sure she'll find some answers which might not immediately help, but will give her focus and thought to how she can come through. So thank you very much. I just really appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Juncker, your dad, Darren.
Oh, sorry, I was just looking. There was when you spoke about all that, Darren, about Franklin, I thought about he's absolutely qualified to talk from a position of experience, you know, being in the concentration camps. And then I thought of a movie I saw on Netflix. It's about that athlete that was airman, and then he crashed into the Pacific and he was taken into a Japanese prisoner of war camp. And you cannot believe the horrendous torture and the cruelty of some of those Japanese officers. And it's an amazing story. You've got to actually watch it. I'll try and post it on the group. It's just a story of what Frankel was saying, of how you can turn around, you know, absolute hatred in your heart, and how debilitating it can be. I know it's got a Christian theme because he goes, in the end of the day, ends up at a Billy Graham crusade, but it doesn't diminish the hope and the absolute turnaround in the guy's life fortunes. But I'll try and post it on for you. It's a true story. It's a testimony about God's love and God's forgiveness, and how God can take somebody from absolute depths of despair and bring them to newness of life. But I'll post it on the group for you once I got a screenshot of it.
I think that movie was directed or produced by Angelina Jolie, in fact.
Could be that one, could be. But the storyline gives God all the glory. It's
sure,
more about God's redemption. It's almost strange if she was a director, because, not meaning that, you know, trying to judge her, but then given Angelina Jolie's background and she raised as a child, maybe she saw some redemption in that story, you know, who knows?
I'm looking for it now, actually.
Thanks for that. It was very beneficial, and we can all take take some lessons out of it.
That is the movie called Unbroken.
I don't think you heard you, T.
Dad, that movie, is it called Unbroken?
Yes, I think that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then it is Angelina Jolie's movie.
I think it's that one. I'll check.
Okay, but I think we can carry on, Nanda, if there's anyone else.
Yeah, Gary should be next.
Yeah, I highly respect Viktor Frankl. Isn't it amazing? It's a lesson to all of us that a man that lived through it, and the Jewish people as a whole. I think it's incredible that they could just dig their head in the sand and cry, be depressed daily. But as someone that's got a bit of perspective, you know, it's incredible. Um, and then also the other thing that I was thinking of there, in Sunday school we just taught about these biblical characters like King David, Solomon, Moses. We taught the top level of who they are, almost like they are supernatural and
Yes.
godlike, that they just someone to be aspired to, and we should. But in reality, like we've just gone into, they are human beings. They are fallible. Um, it's really eye-opening that God can really use anyone and everyone with all our mental illnesses.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it was really good, Darren. Thanks.
One of my favorite teachings so far, Darren, and I agree with what Gary said, and that what amazes me is that the disciples themselves and any big names in the Bible were just human beings with their own sets of problems, and nothing's changed. People, people haven't changed. We're still the same inherently. That's why we need God. Thank you. Very, very, very good teaching.
Good, I'm glad.
All right, dear, it's just here. I think Lucy, I don't know what happened. But she's not. She's not here. What was I about to say now? I guess the one question I want to ask really is one thing. Me and Ina were talking about this leading up to this teaching. It almost what would you say? And I guess this is can be very controversial. What about probably the most famous human figure in the Bible, Jesus? What would you say was he almost looks like he struggled with depression,
Oh yes, I think so.
just because of the way because one thing I noticed, and I was speaking to Ina about this, um, we forget that he wasn't born like he didn't have like a microchip. Like as soon as he was 0, 0, he knew everything. And like imagine
Right.
being growing up told by Mary and Joseph, like, hey, you know what we read about in the Bible? That guy in Genesis, they wouldn't say Genesis 3 verse 15, but you know, that guy and this thing, yeah, that's all actually about you. I mean, it's just it's like, oh, that it's enough being Jewish and being from the tribe of Judah, and even probably knowing that you're also of of um, of royal descent. So that's not going to exactly be a nice picture here, but you are dealing with all that stuff. That can't be mentally easy to deal with. So I don't know. What would you say? Probably Jesus with mentally as a human, because he was still a human, even though Christianity likes to downplay that aspect of him.
He asked God, why had he forsaken him?
Right.
Exactly.
He repeats David's depressing words. He asks his friends to stay with him, which is depression leaves you in a position where you don't want to be alone. Loneliness, that's not a positive. Um, he has a tantrum more than once. That's recorded. Um, he clearly gets
I
better.
also see Jesus liked a little bit of solitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't really enjoy. When I say enjoy crowds, he had compassion on them.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there are times you see in the letters and the eyewitness accounts and stuff that he retreats. He actually
Yeah.
forces himself to retreat from the crowds to spend time alone with his Father in prayer, and probably just his own mental
Yeah.
to gather his own thoughts as a man.
Right. Which would be disturbing for Christians to process, but right.
And there's even an incident, I think it's Luke. Luke's the only account where he talks about him being a child, right? He's that mitzvah. Oh, bar mitzvah, sorry. That
Yeah.
mitzvah. So, where he kind of almost has a Moses signature where he kind of gets ahead of himself a bit and says, it's where did you think I'll be? I've been doing my father's business, and he kind of says,
You know what,
yeah, and
Nanda, you might even have used a word like, obviously I'd be with my father.
he is stunned. He does seem stunned that they even asked him. He's confused. Why were they looking for him for three
Yeah, like,
days? Why they?
didn't you know that?
I think there's
So
a reference where I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I've read it that he says he questions one of the disciples or someone that comes to couldn't grasp the concept, and I'm pretty sure he says, "Are you dim?"
Yeah, no, definitely. He says it more than once.
So is that for me is very straight, very very. There's no filter there.
No, but that's
I
spot
love Gary
on.
because Darren, you'll correct me, but that one of his famous words, like saying, "Oh, you have little faith," I think is a kind of a phrase to actually say, "Why aren't you getting this? Why aren't you understanding what
Yeah.
I'm saying?"
At one point even says, how long must I be with you guys? Like, are you thick? Basically, like, if you say to them, how long are you still going to be disciples? That's not a compliment.
So yeah, I think that's awesome to see. Again, he Christianity elevates him to, and not that it isn't important, but there's almost no human element to the Christian Jesus, and he's kind of like this. He's a human, but he's not really a human because he's not like us at all. That's just kind of like a cover story we have to touch on. But like the one me and Kathy were talking about sweating, and he's sweating in Gethsemane, and when he has a human moment on the cross where he says, "Why have you forsaken me?" I mean, those things. That's really
Human.
inspiring because Paul says so that if he did it, so can you. And I know it's not, we won't ever be like him in that perfect way, but it's still Jesus. I think you said this. Jesus' salvation wasn't cheap, so neither will
Right.
ours. So I like that. So yeah, I just wanted you to touch on like just Jesus and his mental stand, and I like that everyone else kind of brought in elements that they've thought about. So yeah, D, thanks.
So is that it then? Everyone done?
Yeah, that's everyone. That is everyone.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for your patience with a very long session. I will cut these up into nice little bite-sized chunks again um, for the YouTube channel. So please do get people aware of that space that we've got so that we can, get the word out. Thank you for your time and your interaction again, and have a good weekend further.
Thanks, D. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.